Chapter 873. According to what I know, this purple crystal hand has already been lost. Chu Yang asked, intentionally or unintentionally. How was your master attacked by others? Is there anyone in the world who can use this kind of martial arts? Wei Wuyan nodded. Yes. That year, my teacher fought with the law enforcement master of the torture hall. After he came back, he realized that his injuries were very strange, and he needed to use purple crystals to suppress them. Then, he immediately brought me to live in seclusion. Later, he realized that the place where we used to live had been burned to the ground. Chu Yang murmured, law enforcement master of the torture hall. Chu Yang didn't expect that this matter was related to the law enforcement officers again. In the calamity space, the sword spirit roared ferociously. You must seriously injure this law enforcement master of the torture hall. As long as you don't want his life, the heavier the better. The heavier the better. Chu Yang sweated. What's wrong with you? The purple crystal hand is one of the few unique martial arts that I can't master. The sword spirit said excitedly. To practice the purple crystal hand, one must be in a completely enclosed purple crystal mine, using the aura of the complete purple crystal to cultivate, and extracting the aura of death from the purple crystal. Once it's completed, then the purple crystal hand must be suppressed with the purple crystal. Chu Yang said. Of course I know this. Do you want the purple crystal mine? No. The sword spirit said angrily. Why do I want the purple crystal mine? Because the first section of the calamity sword has a characteristic, which is purple aura from the east. Only in such a place can it be hidden for 10,000 years. In other words, there's more than a 50% chance of finding the first section of the calamity sword in a place where one can practice the purple crystal hand. And as long as you completely injure the person who practices the purple crystal hand and injure his foundation, he can only recover after returning to the place where he practices the purple crystal hand. In this way, we can follow the clues and find the first section of the calamity sword. The sword spirit said hurriedly. I see. Chu Yang's heart also started to beat rapidly. He only knew the whereabouts of the first 5 sections of the calamity sword, but he didn't have any clue about the rest. He didn't expect to get the news of the first section of the calamity sword here. This is really a surprise. Good people will be rewarded. Divine Dr. Chu's eyes were brimming with tears. If I didn't save Wei Wuyan, how could I obtain such important information? When the sword spirit heard the words a doctor has the heart of a parent, he immediately became silent. Only her heart was filled with disdain. You really dare to say this? If it wasn't, would you have saved Wei Wuyan? What do you mean by a doctor with the heart of a parent? Bullshit. Where is that person? Chu Yang asked. He's in Enforcer City. Wei Wuyan was a little dejected. Law Enforcement City is full of experts. I've only been there once, and I was almost buried there. In the end, I escaped from the dog hole at the side of Law Enforcement City. Since we have his whereabouts, that makes things easier. Chu Yang suppressed the excitement in his heart, but he still couldn't suppress it. He said, since that's the case, let me think about how to temporarily suppress your master's illness. That's great, that's great. Chu Yang didn't even have time to shout out excitedly before Wei Wuyan had already gotten excited. When Wei Wuyan knew that Chu Yang actually had the ability to temporarily suppress the purple crystal hand, he was so excited that he almost forgot himself. He held Chu Yang's hand and said, Little brother, from today onwards I'll follow you. Wherever you go I'll go. He had already made up his mind. No matter where Chu Yang went, he would resolutely follow him. He would rather die than leave Chu Yang. Firstly, it was to repay Chu Yang's kindness. He would protect Chu Yang's safety all the way. Secondly, he would come back to treat his master's purple crystal hand when Chu Yang's cultivation advanced to the next level. Follow me all the way. Protect me? Chu Yang smiled and said, Are you sure? I'm sure. Wei Wuyan nodded affirmatively. Are you sure you won't regret it in the future? Chu Yang frowned. I advise you to think about it carefully. Following me is full of troubles. Wei Wuyan laughed and said heroically, I'm the #1 blood payer, and I've caused so much trouble. Why would I be afraid of any trouble? Of course I won't regret it. Chu Yang nodded with relief. That's great. As long as you don't regret it, I've decided to agree to your request. Wei Wuyan said ecstatically. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Thinking that he was about to get rid of that kind of huge debt, he couldn't help but feel refreshed. His body didn't seem to hurt anymore. Chu Yang was also in a good mood. Finally, I have a personal bodyguard. In the space of tribulation, the sword spirit looked at Wei Wuyan with some pity and said, This guy. It's really hard on him. He's actually so excited as if he's picked up a treasure. This poor guy probably doesn't know that following the tribulation sword master is really much more dangerous and difficult than being the #1 blood payer. It's at least 100 times more dangerous. And he's actually so relieved. Wei Wuyan chuckled and said happily, Then when are we going to visit my master? Let's walk all the way to the White Mang Mountain, which is thousands of miles away, where my master lives in seclusion. Chu Yang said, No hurry, I have 3 friends ahead. We'll set off together when we meet. How would Wei Wuyan know that the 3 friends that Chu Yang mentioned were the culprits, one Renjie and the others, who had caused him to end up like this? Hearing this, he said seriously, No problem. Since they're your friends, then they're my friends too. Don't worry with me around, no one can hurt you. He actually took charge of everything. Wei Wuyan's injuries had just recovered, and he hadn't fully recovered yet. So, he could only sit in the carriage to recuperate. However, under Chu Yang's care, he had already recovered to normal after only 1.5 days. This made Wei Wuyan even more confident that Chu Yang could cure his master's purple crystal hand. Feeling the abundant cultivation, and freely moving his waist and legs that he thought that he would never be able to recover, Wei Wuyan was extremely satisfied. Even his character seemed to have become more cheerful. Along the way, Chu Yang's barbecue skills were also praised by Wei Wuyan. This #1 blood payer now came whenever he smelled the aroma, sat down and drank. He was very casual. In his heart he thought, Anyway, I can't pay off what I owe in this life. So what's the harm in owing more? He was actually full of the mentality of a dead pig, not afraid of boiling water. When Wei Wuyan had such a mentality, he definitely didn't expect that this debt would be forever. Along the way, Chu Yang was practicing martial arts, playing with Chu Lu and amusing her. After Wei Wuyan recovered from his injuries, he played the role of a coachman. He sat upright on the horse's back, holding a whip in his hand, and a worn-out Wuyan sword on his waist. Even his eyes had regained their turbidity. At first glance, he really looked like a poor coachman. After 3 days, they finally arrived at the agreed location. This place was just like what Chu Yang had said earlier. It was surrounded by mountains and rivers, and the scenery was beautiful. After passing through the dense forest and suddenly seeing this place, one's eyes couldn't help but brighten up. An incomparably beautiful feeling arose in one's heart. This was a lake, and the water was clear. It was like a mirror, surrounded by mountains and lush trees. It was quiet and serene. It could be seen that it had been a long time since anyone had appeared here. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a beautiful natural scenery without any traces of destruction. At this moment, both Wei Wuyan and Chu Yang had a feeling of being far away from the mortal world, only in a dream. After a long time, Wei Wuyan sighed softly. This place really makes one unable to bear to do anything here. Even talking seems to disturb this beautiful atmosphere. Chu Yang nodded and admitted, Yes, this is indeed an ideal place in a dream. If one can live in seclusion, in such a place for the rest of one's life, that would really be the day of the immortals. Wei Wuyan became silent. After a long time he said, Live in seclusion for the rest of one's life. I've thought about it before, and I'm very eager to do so. But now, seeing this place and hearing the words live in seclusion for the rest of one, I'm actually a little uncertain, and even a little unwilling. Chu Yang said deeply, I can understand your feelings. Wei Wuyan smiled. Looking at Chu Yang's eyes, he knew that Chu Yang truly understood his feelings at this moment. He couldn't help but feel a trace of warmth in his heart. That was when one still had concerns in this mortal world, and felt that one's life's ambitions had yet to be fulfilled. But at this time, one found an ideal place to live in seclusion. That was when one made the decision to leave this paradise, even after the contradiction and spiritual conflict. Only then would one feel a sudden sense of melancholy in one's heart. Leduo is ultimately a leduo. When you discover your final leduo one day, you will instead turn around and leave with an indescribable feeling. You will even do something that is absolutely opposite to your heart's leduo. You will run away with your heart's leduo. Chu Yang stood quietly by the lake, and his heart was filled with emotions. In these few days, Chu Yang had chatted with Wei Wuyan all the way, and he finally confirmed that Wei Wuyan was indeed a trustworthy person. This person never owed anyone anything in his life. In order to extend his master's life, this person had played the role of an ascetic monk for 100 years. Over these years, he had earned tens of millions of purple crystals, but he himself couldn't distinguish between them, and he was destitute. He clearly knew that his master's injury was a bottomless pit, and sooner or later, it would drag him to his death. But Wei Wuyan had never given up easily. He clearly knew that it was a pit of eternal damnation, but he persisted for 100 years. He didn't keep a single piece of the purple crystals that he had earned. He gave them all to his master, and they turned into a pile of meaningless powder in his master's hands. If this kind of person wasn't trustworthy, then in this world, there weren't many people who could be trusted. A cry of joy came from the carriage. Chu Lur popped her head out and discovered this lake. She jumped out excitedly and ran all the way over. While running, she threw off her shoes and jumped into the lake barefoot. Then, she thought of something and turned back with a red face. "I want to take a bath." "You're not allowed to look." Chu Yang and Wei Wuyan laughed. They pulled up a curtain to cover Chu Lur, and then both of them sat under a tree, breathing in the fresh air here. Both of them were so happy and comfortable that they didn't want to talk. This was a kind of absolute relaxation from the body to the soul. After a long time, Chu Yang asked as if he was sleep-talking, "Brother Wei, do you want to owe me more?" Wei Wuyan also said as if he was in a dream, "Yes, begging for a few monthly votes. Tomorrow I'll explode." "I can't not explode, but I don't dare to write 10 chapters a day anymore. God knows, that's a kind of feeling of almost dying. I'm in a trance, so sleepy that I can't sleep. After taking Valium and sleeping for a while, my legs feel weak when I wake up. That kind of feeling almost makes me think that I've contracted myasthenia gravis. What a terrible feeling. Brothers and sisters, help me. Vote a few more monthly votes tonight to hold on. I'll wake up early tomorrow morning to write, and there should be an update in the morning." Chapter 874. Wei Wuyan definitely didn't expect that he owed Chu Yang a huge favor once again. After the shock, Wei Wuyan felt the powerful energy in his body, and a brand new feeling that he had never experienced before. He couldn't help but be stunned. "Leduo! I've become a supreme martial artist." Wei Wuyan couldn't believe this result. He had become a supreme martial artist, and a first-grade supreme martial artist at that. Wei Wuyan had been stuck at the peak of the martial saint level for many years. He had tried to break through to the first-grade supreme martial artist countless times, but it was all in vain. He knew that his cultivation and mental cultivation weren't there yet, so he relaxed his mentality and waited for the right conditions. However, the failure to break through so many times was a huge blow to Wei Wuyan. Now when someone asked him, "Do you want to owe me another favor?" he casually said, "Sure." Then, he actually became a supreme martial artist because of this favor. Wei Wuyan felt that he was dreaming. He even poked his thigh with the Wuyan sword, and felt the pain that seeped into his bones. Only then did he believe that this was real. "This is the purple cloud pill?" Wei Wuyan asked Chu Yang in disbelief. "Yes." Chu Yang proudly crossed his arms and looked at him. But Wei Wuyan's brain didn't listen to him. "Isn't the purple cloud pill a forbidden medicine for law enforcement officers?" He frowned and was even more confused. "And I heard that the purple cloud pill doesn't have any effect on martial saints. What's going on?" When Wei Wuyan said this, Chu Yang suddenly remembered. He vaguely remembered that Han Shaoran had mentioned before that the purple cloud pill could only be used to raise the cultivation of a high-level monarch to the saint level. But he also said that the purple cloud pill had no effect on the saint level. But after the sword spirit modified the purple cloud pill, he clearly said that it could be used by martial saints. In the tribulation space, the sword spirit smiled proudly. I personally made the purple cloud pill noodles, and the top-grade spiritual medicine, jade snow spirit ginseng. How can it be the same as the medicine made by those ordinary people? Hee. When you get the 5th fragment of the tribulation sword, I'll remake the purple cloud pill. And it can also raise the cultivation of a supreme martial artist. Chu Yang coughed twice and said to Wei Wuyan solemnly, "This is the purple cloud pill that my master personally concocted. My master is a medicine saint. How can the efficacy of his medicine be compared with that of the law enforcement officers? The law enforcers can't, but this one can." Wei Wuyan was indescribably shocked. "Your master is really a peerless genius." Chu Yang nodded proudly. In the tribulation space, the sword spirit grinned in satisfaction. "Master." He. At this moment, Chu Luo had already emerged from the lake. She was dressed neatly, and her hair was dripping with water. She pouted and said, "Big brother, help me comb my hair." Chu Yang laughed and said, "Okay, I'll comb your hair." As he spoke, he took out a comb and began combing his younger sister's hair. Wei Wuyan said enviously, "You siblings have such a good relationship." Chu Yang said, "I only have one sister. Of course, I would love and cherish her like a treasure." Wei Wuyan sighed and said with a little melancholy, "I remember back then. I also had a younger sister." As he spoke, he was a little lost in thought. Chu Yang smiled quietly and didn't say anything. He knew that Wei Wuyan's heart must be very sour now that he had recalled the past. Thus, he didn't disturb him anymore. Chu Luo's bright eyes turned, and she didn't say anything. After a long while, Wei Wuyan said with a hoarse voice, "My younger sister wasn't suitable for cultivation. She got married and had many grandchildren. She lived until she was 80 years old and died without any illness. When she was dying, I was by her side. The last time I combed her hair, I was the one who combed her hair. My younger sister held my hand and said that if there was a next life, she would still be willing to be my younger sister." Wei Wuyan choked, and his Adam's apple moved up and down a few times. He didn't say anything else. Looking at Chu Yang combing Chu Luo's hair, his eyes were full of envy. "How I wish to comb my younger sister's hair again." Chu Yang and Chu Luo didn't say anything. They just stood quietly. One was sitting and the other was standing. Behind them was an infinitely beautiful scenery of the lake and mountains. A young man was combing his younger sister's hair with a face full of tenderness. At the side, someone was watching with infinite envy. All of these combined to form a beautiful picture. Chu Luo's hair was much thicker. Obviously, during this period of time, her body had recovered very well. The pain of the abscess that had plagued her for more than 10 years was suddenly gone. During this period of time, Chu Yang, the peerless doctor, had also prepared food for her according to her body's needs. Her body was now as healthy as the healthiest girl. Chu Yang was combing her hair. When the comb slid to the middle of her shiny black hair, he suddenly felt that his hand was gently grabbed by Chu Luo. He couldn't help but be startled and looked at Chu Luo. Chu Luo turned back and looked at her brother. With a smile in her eyes and deep affection, she said softly, "Big brother, if there is a next life, I would still be willing to be your younger sister Sai." Chu Yang's hand trembled. Wei Wuyan, who was at the side, suddenly let out a muffled cough from his throat. Then he turned his head abruptly. 2 drops of tears fell to the ground as he turned his head. This tranquil lakeside was filled with a sentimental atmosphere in an instant. Chu Luo let go of her hand and sat down obediently, allowing Chu Yang to comb her hair. Chu Yang's movements were gentle and practiced. Chu Luo couldn't help but giggle. She said, "Big brother, you're quite skilled. Did you comb girls' hair often in the past?" Chu Yang coughed and said, "Me? I combed your sister-in-law's hair often some time ago. I've become proficient in it." Chu Luo was immediately interested. "My sister-in-law? What does she look like?" Chu Yang rubbed his nose awkwardly and said, "About the same as you." Chu Luo wrinkled her little nose. "Liar," she thought to herself. "Since she's my sister-in-law, she should be at least 17 or 18 years old, right? No matter how smart this little girl is, she would never think that her sister-in-law is even younger than her now. A typical soybean sprout. Big brother is really a good man. You even comb sister-in-law's hair." Chu Luo had a longing look on her face. "Sister-in-law is pretty, right?" Chu Yang coughed again. About the same as you. Shu Luer giggled and said, Big brother, why didn't you bring sister-in-law back to take a look? Where's sister-in-law now? Chu Yang sighed and thought to himself, if I bring that little grandaunt back now, I'll have to coax these two little girls at the same time. That'll really kill me. Both of them are hard to please. At this moment, Wei Wuyan, who had been silent all this while, suddenly raised his head with a vigilant look on his face. He clearly felt that there were three strong auras coming towards them rapidly, and they were very familiar with them. His eyes flashed, and he was filled with murderous intent. In the forest opposite, the three auras stopped. A voice said in bewilderment, What's going on? Why does it seem like there's an enemy in front? It makes me feel very wrong. Another person said, Yes, it's creepy. Another voice said, Big senior brother and second senior brother are right. Chapter 875. Wei Wuyan roared and flew into the woods like a big bird. He clapped his palms together, and a thunderous sound was heard. 3 bastards. The 3 people reacted at the same time. I was wondering why it felt familiar. It's this guy. The 4 of them fought fiercely. The moment their chi came into contact with each other, the calm surface of the lake was suddenly stirred up like a typhoon. The lake water was swept up into the sky, reaching a height of 1,000 feet. When it fell back down, it was already turbid. The latest chapter of the Holy Hall. The wind whistled, and countless trees flew into the air. Sand and pebbles flew everywhere. It was extremely terrifying. This was just the beginning. The small world that was still quiet and peaceful, just now suddenly became a mess. There was no longer any beautiful artistic conception. Shu Yang sighed deeply. Wei Wuyan was full of confidence. He felt that it would be a piece of cake to deal with these 3 guys after he became a supreme martial artist. But he didn't expect that it would be even more difficult. The other party's cultivation seemed to have increased along with his cultivation. Could it be that the power of the joint attack technique had increased? Wei Wuyan was puzzled, but he didn't relax his hands. Stop! Chu Yang shouted. He's one of us. The 4 people were confused at the same time. In the blink of an eye, Chu Yang had already rushed in like a whirlwind. The 4 people were afraid of hurting him, so they all landed on the ground. 4th brother, one Renjia said puzzledly. How did this bastard become one of us? Yes, 4th brother, Cheng Duiying said sullenly. He's our enemy. Little brother, big brother and second brother are right. Bao Buhuan scratched his head and said. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. He's indeed one of us. As he said, Wei Wuyan also came over. What's going on? Chu Yang said doubtfully. Didn't I tell you that I saved 3 people before saving you? It's the 3 of them. What's wrong with Net? Do you know them? We know them. The 4 people were a little dizzy at the same time. We don't just know them. These 3 guys aren't good people. Wei Wuyan pulled Chu Yang over and solemnly warned. You have to be careful. One Renjia pulled Chu Yang over and said seriously. 4th brother, this guy is not a good person. Why are you with him? This guy is a money grubber. He'll do anything for money. The 2 of them each pulled one of Chu Yang's arms and glared at each other like tigers watching their prey. Chu Yang said helplessly. He's really one of us. He said to one Renjia. Big brother, I met this brother Wei a few days ago. He was injured, so I helped him a little and saved his life. One Renjia stared back at him. You saved him? How can you save this bastard? He wants to use my head to exchange for the bounty. My fucking big head is only worth 70,000 purple crystals in his eyes. Chu Yang said to Wei Wuyan. This is one Renjia, my sworn brother. At that time, their situation was similar to yours. The process was also similar. Wei Wuyan said angrily. How can I not know that? If it weren't for these 3 bastards, I wouldn't be in such a miserable state that I need your help. Cheng Duiying said angrily. What nonsense is this? If you didn't take the initiative to find fault with us, why would we make things difficult for you? If we can't even fill our stomachs, how would we have nothing to do? Wei Wuyan said angrily. Nonsense. Who doesn't want to eat? If it weren't for the fact that your big brother's head is valuable, I wouldn't even bother to lay my hands on him. Listen, listen, listen. One Renjia was so angry that his whole body trembled. 4th brother, let go of me. I must twist off his head and kick it like a ball today. If I can't do it, I'll let you down for helping me raise my cultivation. Wei Wuyan was dumbfounded. Their cultivation was also raised by you? Chu Yang spread out his hands. I have a total of 4 purple cloud pills with me, and the 4 of you have 1 each. It's very equal. The 4 of them felt dizzy at the same time. There's such a coincidence. Then, Chu Yang asked tentatively, we're all friends now. Do you still want to fight? The 4 of them looked at each other and became discouraged at the same time. Wan Renjie glared at him and said, Wei Wuyan, do you still want to kill me? Wei Wuyan turned his head and said lightly, I'm suddenly not interested in your head anymore. Wan Renjie said angrily, You can kill me whenever you want and not kill me whenever you want? What do you mean? Seeing that the 2 of them were about to quarrel again, Chu Yang hurriedly mediated. Chu Luo also ran over to mediate. When Wan Renjie saw Chu Luo, his eyebrows and eyes immediately softened. He asked about Wei Wuyan's well-being and didn't have time to care about him anymore. Net-net, everyone sat down and prepared to eat. Then, both sides were puzzled. Chu Yang had no choice but to tell Wei Wuyan about how he saved Wan Renjie and the other 2. Then, he told them about how he saved Wei Wuyan again. He talked until his mouth was dry. Before he finished, the food was ready. So he talked while eating. Wan Renjie and the others instantly felt better. It turns out that this guy is more miserable than us. Haha, Cheng Duing laughed out loud. This is really retribution for the wicked. Wei Wuyan thought that he was an invincible hero, but who knew that he would step into the gates of hell and end up like this because of a wild beast. This is really satisfying. Wei Wuyan said angrily, What wild beast? You find a wild beast to see if it's powerful or not. That's a 10th grade spirit beast. 10th grade. Cheng Duing curled his lips. No matter whether it's a 10th grade spirit beast or a 1st grade spirit beast, it's a fact that you were bullied by a beast. And you almost died. If it weren't for our 4th brother, you'd be a pile of bones now. Well, in this case, you owe us a favor. Bao Buhuan interrupted. 2nd brother, you're wrong. What do you mean by a pile of bones? If it weren't for our 4th brother, he'd be a pile of feces now. Chu Luo vomited. Wan Renjie turned his head and was very unhappy. What are you talking about? Why are you talking about feces when we're eating? Can you not talk about feces when we're eating in the future? Do you know that people will vomit if they talk about feces when they're eating? He said that he didn't want them to talk about feces, but his mouth was full of feces. Chu Luo covered her mouth and ran out. She ran behind a tree and started to vomit. Wan Renjie was furious at once. He glared at Bao Buhuan and said, Tell me, what should I say to you? I told you not to talk about feces, but you insisted on talking about feces. Look, Laura's vomiting. It's all your fault for talking about feces. Everyone was speechless. Chu Yang was chewing a piece of meat in his mouth. Suddenly, he felt that it was tasteless. He couldn't help but want to vomit. He really couldn't swallow it. Wei Wuyan and Cheng Duing also stopped eating and looked at Wan Renjie with strange expressions. Chu Luo finally came back. Luo, are you okay? Wan Renjie went up to her considerately and said with heartache, It's all this guy's fault for talking about feces when we're eating. I've already scolded him. He won't talk about feces when we're eating in the future. Chu Luo vomited and ran back again. Wei Wuyan couldn't bear it anymore. He stood up and punched Wan Renjie in the face. Then he went up to Wan Renjie and gnashed his teeth. I'll fucking let you talk about feces. Today, I'll beat you into feces. Wan Renjie was furious. 2nd brother, 3rd brother. Come quickly. Cheng Duing and Bao Buhuan swallowed their saliva and looked on gloatingly. Their inaction caused Wan Renjie to suffer a solid beating. Wei Wuyan rode on his body and was as heavy as a mountain. He waved his fists and smashed them down one by one. Banging sounds could be heard. After a long time, Wan Renjie sat there with a bloody nose and a swollen face. He kept complaining that his 3 brothers didn't have the code of brotherhood. They didn't help their big brother when he was being beaten up. This was simply outrageous. The 3 of them just took his words as nonsense and ignored him. After a long time, Bao Buhuan finally said, Big brother, to be honest, I'm already very loyal to my big brother for not beating you up together with him. Chu Yang and Cheng Duing nodded repeatedly. They felt that Bao Buhuan's words really touched their hearts. Wan Renjie was stunned. Why? Wei Wuyan, Chu Yang, Chung Duiying, Bao Buhuan and Chu Luo all said in unison, feces. Wan Renjie's face was full of saliva. In the afternoon, everyone washed up by the lake and felt refreshed. Then, they lay on the beach and chatted. Big brother, have you done that thing? Chu Yang asked casually. Don't mention it. Wan Renjie and the other two said sulkily. We really didn't have the chance to do it. What? Chu Yang suddenly sat up. What happened? Both clans are heavily guarded. During this period of time, they started to assassinate each other, without us doing anything. They've already become jittery and paranoid. When we went there, they were almost in the same lineup, close to each other and watching each other. Those on guard outside are all experts. We didn't have the chance to do anything at all. Wan Renjie said. And this time, the Yi clan has hidden a supreme martial artist here. Once we do it, we don't have the confidence to escape. That way, we won't be able to achieve the purpose of framing them. He sighed. Our supreme martial artist is fake. Theirs is the real deal. There's no way to compare. Chu Yang frowned. How can there be a supreme martial artist in charge of this kind of conflict? This doesn't make sense. Chung Duiying said. I heard that the supreme martial artist is Yi Shisan's backer or someone else. But no matter what, there's definitely a supreme martial artist in charge. Chu Yang nodded silently and said, So you didn't do anything? We didn't do anything. Wan Renjie felt a little embarrassed. He lowered his voice and said, That's because I wanted to come back and discuss with fourth brother. Since you didn't do anything, we might as well make a new plan. Chu Yang said. This isn't a problem. Draw a map for me later and point out the positions of both parties. Then, we'll do it together with Old Wei. Wei Wuyan said. If little brother says to do it, I'll do it. But if little brother doesn't say to do it, I won't help them. Wan Renjie was furious. Who wants your help? Both parties were about to quarrel again. Chu Yang was very annoyed. He raised his hands and surrendered. Can you stop quarreling? The two snorted and looked at each other fiercely. Then they lay back on the beach. It was nighttime. The five of them abandoned the carriage and covered their faces. Carrying Chu Luo on his back, Wei Wuyan quietly used his lightness kung fu to travel 500 miles, and came to the edge of the Black Pine Forest. This side is from the Yi clan. 7 to 8 miles away from here is the Xiao clan. Wan Renjie quietly reminded Chu Yang. Get ready to act. Chu Yang's eyes were cold. We have to fulfill Big Brother's wish before we leave. Second update. I continue to write. Third update. The first update is short of 1,000 words. I'll make up for it in the fourth update. Once he went online, he was shocked. In the blink of an eye, I'm behind by more than 100 votes. What the heck, it's so miserable. I'm not being penetrated, but directly penetrated. Brothers, the horn of counterattack is blown. Chapter 876. In these few days, the grievances between the Huang clan and the Xiao clan seemed to have been put aside first. It became the Yi clan and the Xiao clan fighting to the death. All along, the Yi clan's attitude had been very bad, while the Xiao clan was very innocent and confused, and always wanted to explain some misunderstanding. But on that day, after 7th Master Xiao woke up, the Xiao clan's attitude had a 180-degree change. What the heck? Your Yi clan is too much of a bully. You rushed into our territory and killed our people. Now, you actually have the face to come knocking on our door like the guilty party complaining first? This is really intolerable. You really think that our Xiao clan is easy to bully? After seeing the miserable state of 7th Master Xiao, the entire Xiao clan was furious. So they fought fiercely with the Yi clan. Since then, the two clans were in a stalemate. Every day, there would be their own killers floating around in the huge Black Pine Forest, looking for opportunities. They didn't manage to assassinate many big shots, but the killers themselves fought several times. When enemies meet on a narrow path, the courageous would win. Wan Renjie explained the situation in front of him, then looked at Chu Yang and asked, Fourth brother, how should we do it? Chu Yang's face was full of black lines. What's the name of this supreme martial artist of the Yi clan? Who are the important figures in the Yi clan? You didn't mention this, so how would I know what to do? Wan Renjie hurriedly smiled apologetically. This is a little negligent. Xu Yang rolled his eyes. How can this be negligent? This supreme martial artist of the Yi clan is Yi Wangran. But I think he's just become a first-stage supreme martial artist. And his realm isn't very stable, Cheng Duing commented. Of course, his realm is more stable than ours. As for the others, the important ones are the 8th master of the Yi clan, Yi Wuqian, and the 4th master of the Yi clan, Yi Wutian. These are Yi Wubua's 2 elder brothers. If we want to do it, we'll choose these 2. Wait! Xu Yang suddenly had an idea. It's a little difficult to kill Yi Wuqian and Yi Wutian under tight protection. Moreover, this supreme martial artist won't allow them to be killed. So, it's not easy. But, if we can kill Yi Wangran directly, isn't this better? Kill Yi Wangran? The 4 of them looked at each other. She had never seen Yi Wangran in her life. Once she saw Yi Wangran, her soul would be shattered. Yi Wangran didn't gain his reputation by eating cabbages all these years. This person had a fierce reputation. Everyone else was cultivating in seclusion. But he was the only one who was active in Jianghu and never showed mercy when killing people. He had a ferocious personality. How could such a person, who was also a genuine supreme being, be easy to kill? The 4 of them thought highly of themselves and had just improved their cultivation. But even now, they admitted that they were no match for Yi Wangran, even if it was a joint attack. This was because the 4 of them clearly knew that their supreme martial artists were fake. He had forcefully raised his cultivation to the level of a supreme being, but his spiritual realm and soul realm had yet to reach that level. Moreover, he didn't have any supreme being comprehension. These 4 people were definitely not a match for one supreme being. Only those who suddenly had the epiphany of being a supremacy and endured the baptism of the heavenly lightning could become a supremacy. Now, Xu Yang actually wanted to kill Yi Wangran with the strength of 4 people? Are you sure you're not sending us to our deaths? Wei Wuyan asked cautiously. What are you talking about? Xu Yang rolled his eyes. Even if we can't kill him, if we cripple a supreme martial artist, it'll be a great blow to the Yi clan. Absolutely, absolutely impossible. The 4 of them said in unison with a solemn look. Brother, a supreme martial artist is different from other cultivations. Any sneak attack, plot or trick are useless in front of a supreme martial artist's divine senses. If you want to defeat a supreme martial artist, you can only use your strength fair and square. Otherwise, why is it so difficult to become a supreme martial artist? Because this supreme martial artist's divine senses are fundamentally different from ordinary divine senses. I see. Xu Yang could only admit that he was ignorant and inexperienced. Since this is the case, we can only do this. I'll lure Yi Wangran out, and you guys take the opportunity to kill him. No matter if it's Yi Wuqian or Yi Wutian. As long as we kill or cripple one of them, we'll retreat immediately and meet at the agreed place. We'll leave immediately. Xu Yang said deeply. That won't do. Yi Wangran's cultivation isn't something you can deal with. Wan Renjie shook his head. To put it bluntly, even if Yi Wangran blows at you, he'll be able to kill you. I have my own ways to deal with this. Xu Yang laughed. I have a kind of magical technique that can imitate all kinds of auras. I can even imitate the aura of a supreme martial artist. You just need to tell me who are the high-level supreme martial artists in the Shao clan. I'll choose one to impersonate. Xu Yang's eyes flickered. Suddenly, his expression changed, and an indescribable majestic aura emerged. He said in a vicissitude tone. For little friends, where are you going? It's really the aura of a supreme martial artist. And his divine senses spread out, covering the sky and earth. Within this small area, it was even filled with the power to cause the mountains to crumble and the earth to split open. The 4 of them gasped at the same time. It's really powerful. Brother Wei, carry Luer on your back and stay in the dark to support them, Xu Yang said to Wei Wuyan. Wei Wuyan nodded heavily. Don't worry. With me around, no one can hurt Luer. Xu Yang nodded. Let's start. The campsite of the Yi clan was shrouded in darkness. There were a total of 3 campsites arranged in a triangular formation, and all the trees nearby had been chopped down. Well, no, all the branches were gone, leaving only bare tree trunks. In such a dark night, one's hearing couldn't be deceived, but one's vision could be deceived. So, All the trees here have been cleared. When Chu Yang approached here, he finally understood the reason why Wan Renjia and the other two couldn't carry out the assassination after being reminded by the sword spirit. The surroundings of this campsite were filled with supreme martial artist's divine senses. From top to bottom, the supreme martial artist's divine senses were densely intertwined like a spider web. As long as one touched an invisible supreme martial artist's divine sense, the supreme martial artist who laid down the divine sense inside would be able to immediately identify whether the person was an enemy or a friend, and attack accordingly. I see. Chu Yang stopped in his tracks. Looking at the empty night in front of him, he gasped. Is this the real strength of a supreme martial artist? Yes, the sword spirit said. Only when one reaches this level can he be qualified to be called a supreme martial artist. The sword spirit also gasped and said, so, Wei Wuyan and the others can't be considered as a supreme martial artist. The starting point of a supreme martial artist is the heavenly network's divine sense, the sword spirit said lightly. And to a supreme martial artist, this kind of divine sense doesn't have a problem of consumption. Instead, it's a kind of cultivation. So there won't be any supreme martial artist who overworks himself. This is a supreme martial artist. Chu Yang's eyes shone brightly. This is the first supreme martial artist that you've come into contact with in the upper three heavens. Although he's only a first-grade supreme martial artist, although he's only a beginner. But I have to remind you that this supreme martial artist's ability is at least 3 times that of Wei Wuyan and the other 3 combined. So when you propose to kill this supreme martial artist, you're actually courting your own death. And the kind of death where you can't even fight back. It's already very polite of them that they didn't beat you up on the spot. The sword spirit looked at Chu Yang somewhat mockingly. Chu Yang was a little embarrassed. It's my fault. I didn't understand the situation. I'll explain to them afterwards and apologize for my mistake. The sword spirit looked at him with some surprise and said, yes, but it's fine as long as you say it clearly. There's no need to apologize. Chu Yang said lightly, I almost sent them to their deaths. How can I not apologize? Moreover, this kind of mistake is already very fatal once. This kind of mistake comes from my smooth sailing. It can be said that I'm spoiled. It may not necessarily not happen again in the future. If I make such a mistake again in the future, and don't correct it in time, it'll be a huge sacrifice. Of course, I know that apologizing hurts my self-esteem, but it's precisely because my self-esteem is hurt this time that I can firmly remember this matter. The sword spirit was silent for a long while. Finally, he sighed. The reason why you can walk step by step to where you are today with your weak strength is indeed not luck. You often reflect on yourself 3 times a day, right? You didn't say it clearly in the past. So, I saw that every time you succeeded, there seemed to be an element of luck. But now, I finally understand that it's not luck. It's your exquisite calculations time and time again. Chu Yang nodded lightly. That's why I'm where I am today. And my personality is completely different from my previous life. Because this time, the calculations will make my thinking more and more flexible and careful. Often reflecting on my mistakes, and the conclusion, after every adventure, will let me automatically come up with the best countermeasure the next time I come into contact with the same situation. Chu Yang chuckled and said, actually, this is what I'm relying on. Having this is already the most amazing thing. The sword spirit praised sincerely. This is something even more terrifying than the supreme martial artist's divine consciousness on the stone wall. Because a supreme martial artist may not realize his mistakes, but you can realize it from time to time. This is because I treat myself as an enemy, Chu Yang said deeply. And they don't. The sword spirit chewed on the meaning of this sentence. Suddenly, from this sentence, he understood Chu Yang's deep regret, treating himself as an enemy. From this sentence, it could be seen how much Chu Yang regretted his actions in his previous life. How much hatred. This may not only be because of Mo Qingwu. There were many other factors as well. While he was thinking, Chu Yang's consciousness had already sunk into silence. The sword spirit took a deep breath, took over Chu Yang's body, and operated the 1,000 phantom technique with all his strength. According to his own memory, he created a third-stage supreme martial artist aura. He kept a part of his divine consciousness that had merged with Chu Yang's, and sent the rest out like a raging wave. Everyone in the Yi clan was in their own tents. On the surface, there were more than 200 experts sitting cross-legged and practicing martial arts. In such a tense situation, no one dared to really fall asleep. Just at this moment suddenly, everyone's countenance changed greatly at the same time. From afar, a strong aura swept over like a flash flood. The clouds that passed by in the sky suddenly split apart and disappeared into nothingness. Supreme Martial Artist Expert. Immediately, an aura full of vicissitudes of life and loneliness surged, and a bleak voice said lightly, "Yi Wangran, come out and have a chat with me. How about it?" Third update, begging for monthly votes. Today is Sister Yin Shichi's birthday. I wish her a happy birthday, and wish her a happy life. At the same time, I hope that everyone can give their blessings to Sister Yin in the comments section, and show the warmth of our proud family. I thank everyone on behalf of Sister Yin. Chapter 877. This faint voice didn't contain much power, but it floated out calmly, and everyone could hear it clearly. Although the voice was faint, it was full of loneliness and boredom. It was as if he was facing hundreds of experts of the Yi clan, but he still couldn't raise his spirits. Everyone woke up at the same time. They walked out of the tent and looked up. For 500 feet away, on the top of a big tree, a lonely figure stood with his hands behind his back, looking up at the sky. His black robe fluttered in the wind. It gave people the feeling that this person would fly away with the wind at any time and return to the vast world. This senior is Yi Wutian, the fourth master of the Yi clan, raised his voice and asked, "May I know why Senior is looking for our ancestor?" The man in black looked up at the sky, and his robe fluttered. Then he slowly lowered his head and looked at Yi Wutian, giving him a deep look. When Yi Wutian's eyes met with the other party's, he suddenly felt that the other party's eyes had turned into the night sky full of stars. In an instant, he actually saw stars, and a feeling of dizziness rose from the depths of his divine soul. Although his body was still, his divine soul seemed to have been turned upside down. Yi Wutian couldn't help but hold his forehead with one hand and close his eyes hard. He moaned, "Senior." He couldn't speak anymore. But the others were all shocked. Although Yi Wutian only called out a form of address, everyone knew that this short word was already begging for mercy. Yi Wutian, who was known to be lawless, actually became like this under the other party's gaze? Then it was obvious what kind of realm the other party was in. The man in black raised his head again and looked at the bright moon in the sky with a somewhat melancholy look. After a long time he said lightly, "Yi Wangran, if you don't come out, I'll go in." His voice was faint, but the threat in his tone was obvious. "If you don't come out, I'll kill my way in. I'll kill all of you in one go. If you don't want your Yi clan to die here, then come out obediently." This sentence wasn't spoken out, but everyone in the Yi clan clearly felt the existence of this sentence in their hearts. At the same time, a trace of murderous intent floated between heaven and earth, as if it was gradually spreading. His killing intent was faint, as if it was not there at all. The black-clothed man on the treetop sighed softly with a hint of helplessness. Everyone understood what this sigh meant. "Sigh. I still can't control my murderous aura freely. My cultivation is still not high enough." Everyone looked at each other in shock. Only supreme martial artists of the 5th grade and above could vanquish the killing intent into nothingness. The black-clothed man in front of him had already achieved the level of faintly discernible, yet he was still not satisfied. A deep voice rang out from the Yi clan's camp. Such a decisive battle was originally meant for the younger generation to vent their anger, and for us older generation to train our troops. Your Shao clan actually sent out an expert like you? There was some dissatisfaction in his voice. Clearly, he was blaming the Shao clan for making a big fuss over nothing. Haha, us the older generation? The man in black on the treetop let out a faint chuckle. Yi Wangran, who's from our older generation? Yi Wangran said, "Isn't it us?" The black-clothed man on the treetop fell silent. The next moment, he suddenly shouted with the power of his divine soul, "Yi Wangran!" With this shout, All the experts of the Yi clan simultaneously felt that a vast sea of blood suddenly appeared in their divine souls. After a loud roar, the sea of blood suddenly surged with monstrous waves. The bright red color of blood connected with the sky and the earth, and there was no other color. They couldn't help but close their eyes suddenly, and their bodies swayed twice. For a long time, they didn't dare to open their eyes. Their faces were full of horror. With a swoosh, a black shadow flew out from the Yi clan's camp. It flew up lightly, and stayed close to the ground for 300 feet. Then with a graceful turn of its body, it turned and rushed upwards. Like a rocket, it rushed to a height of 500 feet, and then flew backwards. It actually widened the distance again, and landed on the top of a big tree 300 feet away from the black-clothed man. All the movements were done in one go. First it flew at a low altitude, then turned and rose, then retreated and stood firm. It didn't even take a breath. This kind of body movement was indeed more agile than a bird. But Yi Wangran, who had this kind of body movement, looked very serious. Looking at the black-clothed man opposite him, he took a deep breath and said, "What a strong divine soul!" The black-clothed man snorted and said, "Yi Wangran, which generation of the Yi clan are you from?" Yi Wangran straightened his body and said, "I'm from the 15th generation of the Yi clan. I'm the direct descendant of the Yi clan, and I'm ranked first." Although he still didn't admit the other party's identity as a senior, he answered the other party's question truthfully. In fact, this was already a kind of attitude. "I'm lower in seniority than you," the black-clothed man said. "Oh, 15th generation. Well, I remember that I'm from the 50th generation of the Shao clan. Haha, I didn't expect that the 15th generation of the Yi clan has also become a supreme martial artist." He seemed to be at a loss again. After a long time he asked, "How's Senior Yi D?" Yi Wangran was silent for a while, then said, "Elder is fine." He wasn't sure of the other party's identity now, but he didn't dare to be uncertain. So he could only answer vaguely, "Well." The black-clothed man seemed to be very satisfied with Yi Wangran's answer. He sighed and said, "How many years has it been? The moon is still the moon." This sentence made Chu Yang, who was hiding in the tribulation space, almost laughed out loud. If the moon isn't the moon, could it have become the sun? Yi Wangran actually had the same feeling. He also sighed and said, "Beautiful women have white hair, while heroes have white bones. For thousands of years, only the moon hasn't changed." The black-clothed man said lightly, "What hasn't changed is the heavenly law." Yi Wangran was shocked. He finally said respectfully, "Thank you for your teachings, senior. You're right. What hasn't changed is the heavenly law." The black-clothed man nodded with relief. "You're worth teaching." He still looked at the moon with his hands clasped behind his back. His voice was ethereal as he said, "Tonight, the moon is bright and the stars are sparse. The moonlight shines on everything. I suddenly felt a little lost, so I wanted to come out for a walk." Yi Wangran said respectfully, "Yes." The black-clothed man continued lightly, "The feud between the Yi clan and my Shao clan has been going on for a long time. But both sides have always been friendly. Even if there's a matter of life and death, we've never made a big fuss." "Yi Wangran, do you know why?" Yi Wangran became respectful and said, "Back then, this ancestor swore in front of the tribulation sword that all my grandchildren would be brothers forever. If there's any unfilial behavior, the big clans will kill them together." The black-clothed man nodded slowly. "After I came out from my closed-door training, I looked at the moon from afar and felt touched. But I heard that your Yi clan had launched a large-scale invasion. So I decided to come out for a walk." Yi Wangran complained in his heart, "You came out for a walk, but don't come to me. How can I bear to see you come out for a walk?" I suddenly knew that someone from the Yi clan was called Yi Wangran. The black-clothed man's clothes fluttered silently in the air. He also laughed silently. "So, my Wangran came to talk to you." Yi Wangran's face turned bitter. He thought, "It's because of my name." He asked, "May I know who you are?" The black-clothed man laughed. "I'm from the 50th generation, ranked 10th. Now, do you know who I am?" Yi Wangran's face changed instantly. He became even more respectful and said, "So you're 10th Master Shao, who was known as the one who broke the heavens with a single sword. Back then, The three venerables of Heaven Wasteland ran amok in the southeast and claimed to be invincible. 10th Master Shao was ordered by his clan to kill these three people. He only used a single sword to make the arrogant three venerables of Heaven Wasteland bow down to him and disappear from the martial world. That sword is said to be called Earth-Shaking. The black-clothed man seemed even more lonely. He said bleakly, "The past is the past. Why mention it?" Yi Wangran said, "Yes." The black-clothed man stood quietly and motionlessly, as if he was immersed in his memories. He didn't move. Yi Wangran didn't dare to move. He didn't speak. Yi Wangran didn't dare to speak either. The divine soul power that the other party had shown had completely shocked him. Yi Wangran now believed 1000% that this black-clothed man in front of him was the 10th Master Shao of the Shao clan, who once ran amok in the upper three heavens among millions of experts. It was said that after him, although every generation of the Shao clan's grandsons would surpass this number, no one dared to be ranked 10th. Ever since the 10th Master Shao used a single sword to break the heavens, he had kept this ranking for himself forever. In the face of such a legendary figure, even Yi Wangran, a supreme martial artist, had to respect and fear him from the bottom of his heart. After a long time, this black-clothed 10th Master Shao flicked his sleeves and floated away from the treetops. He floated towards the distance of the vast night, leaving behind a faint sentence, "Follow me." He floated away without looking back. Yi Wangran didn't dare to hesitate at all. He immediately followed up. The speed of this 10th Master Shao in front wasn't fast. At least, in the eyes of Yi Wangran, this supreme martial artist, such speed was really nothing. It was only the speed of a saint. He couldn't understand why this 10th Master Shao had to travel at such a slow speed since he wanted to talk to him. But this 10th Master Shao had his hands clasped behind his back all the way, facing the bright moon and clear sky. It seemed that as he walked, he was reminiscing, feeling melancholy, and comprehending. The other party's otherworldly attitude made Yi Wangran not dare to act rashly, let alone disturb him. He could only follow the other party's speed. He obediently stayed 200 feet behind him and followed him patiently. Yi Wangran, what do you think of the mountains and rivers in the southeast? As they floated, this 10th Master Shao spoke again. Once he spoke, it was as if he was testing him. Yi Wangran looked around from a high altitude and praised. The mountains and rivers are magnificent, lofty and steep, and the confluence of heaven and earth. It's really a first-class scenery in the world. It's no wonder that the Shao clan can produce so many heroes in such a beautiful place. Haha. With a faint laugh, this 10th Master Shao shook his head lightly. Elder, what do you mean? Yi Wangran humbly asked for advice. Back then, I was fortunate enough to follow Elder Yi Di to tour the mountains and rivers. At that time, Elder Yi Di once asked me, 10th, what do you think of my mountains and rivers? 10th Master Shao said lightly. Yi Wangran's spirits were instantly lifted. He said, then, how did you answer back then? The two figures floated quietly from a high altitude like flowing clouds. At this moment, Yi Wangran clearly felt that there were 4 powerful auras hidden below. But 10th Master Shao didn't react. So Yi Wangran also pretended not to know and flew over with a swoosh. It's just 4 martial saints. Since 10th Master Shao had come in person, how could he launch a sneak attack? Yi Wangran had unconditional trust in this elder's elegant demeanor. Not only him, but everyone in the big clans also trusted him. Once such a peerless expert made a move, the mountains would collapse and the earth would crack. How could he launch a sneak attack? Moreover, Yi Wangran was now full of curiosity and thirst for knowledge. He knew that since the other party had said this, he was going to give him some advice. Usually, a word from such an expert was better than decades of hard work. How could Yi Wangran let go of such an opportunity? 10th Master Shao seemed to have a faint smile on his face. After floating for a few miles like a breeze, he said, back then, when Elder Yi Di asked me this question, I was thinking about why he asked me this question. He said lightly, but when I asked you just now, you answered without hesitation. So this shows that you didn't think about it. Yi Wangran instantly sweated profusely. One of them took the initiative to think about it, while the other didn't. The difference between them was huge. Elder, please give me some advice. Yi Wangren only felt a gust of cold wind blowing on his body. He actually felt the coolness of autumn at this moment. Back then, after I thought about it, I replied, both Dou and Southeast have a long history, 10th Master Xiao said with a faint smile. Yi Wangren started to ponder. Both Dou and Southeast have a long history. The meaning of this sentence wasn't small at all. It was obvious that he wanted to compare the Xiao clan with the Yi clan. Moreover, he said this sentence in front of Elder Yi Di. This 10th Master Xiao was really very daring. I wonder what Elder Yi Di said at that time? As he thought about it, he asked, Elder, may I ask what Elder Yi Di said at that time? 10th Master Xiao smiled lightly and shook his head. He said, Elder Yi Di said, 10th Master Xiao is indeed a man of great talent with eagle eyes and wolf eyes. A man of great talent with eagle eyes and wolf eyes. Yi Wangran's heart shook. He seriously pondered over this sentence. This sentence was obviously somewhat derogatory, but also somewhat commendatory. What did Elder Yi Di mean by saying this? He thought for a long time, but he didn't have an answer. Finally he asked, Then, what do you think of my answer just now? This sentence seemed to be comparing him with that 10th Master Xiao at that time. He wanted to know what was the gap between them. The two of them were like flowing clouds and breezes. Unknowingly, they had already drifted past 4 or 5 mountains, and were far away from the Black Pine Forest. Chapter 878, Part 7 Chapter 154 Exposed 10th Master Xiao was still moving forward calmly, but he sped up a little. He said lightly, As for your answer, Yi Wangran said modestly, How is it? From the simplest sentence, you can tell a person's nature. 10th Master Xiao laughed and shook his head. The more casual the question is, the more sincere the answer will be. This sentence of yours is pure flattery. 10th Master Xiao smiled lightly. You're a little hypocritical. Such a character is a big obstacle to martial arts. You must be careful. Yi Wangran's heart skipped a beat. He said, A big obstacle to martial arts. 10th Master Xiao said indifferently. You might think that when you see a person, you speak the human language, and when you see a ghost, you speak the ghost language. When you meet a person, you speak only 30% of your words, and you don't completely throw away your heart. You'll even be complacent. But you've neglected that since you won't be at a disadvantage, you won't be able to take advantage of others. Yi Wangran surrendered willingly. Elder, what you said is very reasonable. 10th Master Xiao smiled lightly. So, your future is not optimistic. If you're likely to destroy yourself. Yi Wangran's whole body shook. He said, Elder, you mean? 10th Master Xiao looked at him deeply. He stopped for the first time and said lightly, Your achievements will stop here for the rest of your life. Yi Wangran looked defeated and murmured, Stop here for the rest of my life. 10th Master Xiao stopped. His clothes fluttered in the wind. He looked at the mountains and valleys under his feet and said, What do you see? Ah. Yi Wangran was at a loss. What do you think this place is? Asked 10th Master Xiao. This place is. Yi Wangran looked up, but found that he didn't recognize the surrounding scenery at all. He had unknowingly run for a long distance. You. 10th Master Xiao smiled lightly and commented, You're too focused on your head. The latest chapter of Martial Yin Yang. Yi Wangran blushed with shame and said, Just now, I was only focused on listening to your teachings, and actually neglected it. 10th Master Xiao chuckled and said benevolently, And let's go back. It should be about time now. This old man is also going back to cultivate in seclusion. If you go back and see Senior Yi Di, please send my regards. Yes. Elder, what do you mean by it's about time? Yi Wangren faintly felt that something was wrong. 10th Master Xiao floated up and chuckled. Your Yi clan has gone overboard this time. So this old man will let them teach you a lesson first. I had no choice but to lure you out. It should be done by now. Yi Wangran was shocked and dumbfounded. Elder, you. He was both shocked and furious. He never imagined that such a senior would actually use such a despicable method. 10th Master Xiao smiled faintly. His sleeves fluttered, and he flew up to a mountain. Yi Wangran will meet again someday. Yi Wangran was so angry that his whole body trembled. He finally understood the other party's trick. Suddenly he yelled, stretched out his hands and shouted, I'm so pissed off. With a boom, the whole mountain in front of him was lifted up into the air by him. Although he was furious, he also knew that the cultivation of this 10th Master Shao wasn't something that he could deal with. It was already considered very good that 10th Master Shao didn't take the opportunity to deal with him now. So, of course, he didn't dare to find trouble with this 10th Master Shao. He just made a move casually to vent his anger, and was about to go back. But at the moment when he turned around, he found that 10th Master Shao actually staggered a little under the effect of his ability to lift up the mountain. He even looked a little embarrassed. Then he continued to float up at the speed of a saint. Yi Wangran was stunned. What's going on? His cultivation is much higher than mine. How can such a situation happen? Immediately, a terrifying thought arose in Yi Wangran's heart. Could it be that this is a trick? As soon as he thought of this, his heart suddenly thumped. He no longer hesitated and chased after 10th Master Shao. Elder, take care. I still have something to ask you. Net. 10th Master Shao, who was in black, paused for a while. Then he finally stopped. He slowly turned around and said calmly, Yi Wangran, do you want to attack me? As he spoke, that powerful divine power suddenly surged. Yi Wangran instinctively paused, and felt a little uncertain. He thought, if he's a fake, how can his divine power be so powerful? He couldn't help but have some misgivings. He said, Elder, I don't really understand what you're saying. So may I ask? 10th Master Shao laughed and said, Yi Wangran, are you doubting my identity? Yi Wangran's thoughts were seen through by 10th Master Shao. He couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He said, I don't dare. 10th Master Zhao's gaze turned into lightning. He looked at Yi Wangran quietly, making Yi Wangran flustered. After a long time, 10th Master Shao asked coldly, what do you not understand? Yi Wangran murmured, I'm just concerned about your body. I heard that you came to my Yi clan to look for elixirs when you were injured 300 years ago. Have you found them? If you haven't, I've brought some with me this time. The sword spirit was instantly stunned. He really didn't know how to answer this question. He didn't know whether this matter was true or not. It should be a test. But should he say that he had them? Or not? This was a simple question. But the sword spirit and Chu Yang were stumped. If they didn't answer well, this guy in front of them was a supreme martial artist. Even if the sword spirit and Chu Yang joined forces now, they were definitely not his match. There shouldn't be such a thing. Chu Yang pondered. 300 years ago, this 10th Master Shao already had the cultivation of at least a second-stage supreme martial artist. He was in closed-door meditation every day. Who could hurt him? Besides, even if he was really injured, would he still need to go to the Yi clan to look for elixirs? The sword spirit thought for a while, and felt that what Chu Yang said was reasonable. He snorted and said, what injury? Which level have I been injured before? Yi Wangran, you're really inexplicable. You actually used such a clumsy method to test me. Forget it. Seeing that you're young and ignorant, I won't argue with you. Go back quickly. Yi Wangran's face changed instantly. It became grief and indignation, and there were signs of hysteria. There was a kind of extreme anger. He stared at the sword spirit and gnashed his teeth. I hate it so much. I hate it so much, I really hate it. The sword spirit knew that something bad was going to happen. He forced himself to calm down and shouted, Yi Wangran. Good junior. Yi Wangran was extremely indignant. It's ridiculous that I've been deceived by you for so long. If I don't take revenge for this, how can I face the world? You're actually so daring to deceive me. The sword spirit shouted coldly. Yi Wangran, how dare you be rude to me? He still thought that he was lucky and acted like a senior. Yi Wangran looked up and laughed miserably. You still want to continue deceiving me? Ha ha ha. It's really ridiculous. 700 years ago, Xiaoshi suffered from qi deviation. He came to my Yi clan to ask for the soul returning frost to save his life. He couldn't bear it anymore. With a loud roar, he slapped his palm towards Yi Wangran. The sword spirit and Chu Yang groaned at the same time. Damn it. Such a thing actually happened to Xiaoshi. Man proposes, God disposes. The sword spirit laughed and said, you're smart. But it's not a wasted trip to make you, Yi Wangran. Follow me like a dog and call me senior all the way. Ha ha ha. He spread out his body and flew out like a stream of light. Yi Wangran was so angry that his face directly changed shape. With a crooked mouth and slanted eyes, he chased after him crazily. If I don't capture you alive today, and let you taste the cruelest torture in the world, I, Yi Wangran, have really lived in vain. The sword spirit had just flown out when Yi Wangran caught up with him. He stretched out his big hand, and the wind and clouds in the sky instantly condensed into a huge hand that was thousands of feet wide. Then it grabbed down fiercely. The sword spirit and Chu Yang groaned at the same time. Originally, the two of them were still complacent. This time, not only had they completed the task perfectly, but they had also planted an inner demon in Yi Wangran's heart that, your cultivation will stop at this level forever. What a good thing. Damn it. How did I get seen through at the last moment? What should I do now? Not to mention anything else, I'm absolutely unable to resist this grab of his. He forcibly used the power of his divine soul and let out a sharp roar, which stimulated Yi Wangran's divine soul fiercely. Yi Wangran's divine soul was shaken, and his big hand stopped in the air. The sword spirit's body slid out like a fish in water. He recklessly launched a mad dash at full speed. With a hissing sound, a faint white smoke appeared in the air. Then it disappeared rapidly in the air and became smaller. Yi Wangran snorted, and became even more resentful. Although I don't know what kind of fortuitous encounter you've had that caused the power of your divine soul to be so strong, your cultivation is still too weak. At this moment, the two of them were already thousands of feet apart, but Yi Wangran's words were still extremely clear. Every word seemed to explode beside the sword spirit's ears, as if they were going to drill into his ears. The sword spirit didn't utter a single word. He just continued to advance at full speed. Wherever he could, he would definitely turn. His body was as agile as a spirit snake. He constantly changed his angle and direction. Every time he changed his angle and direction, his speed would increase a little. All of a sudden, Yi Wangran shouted from behind, "Stop!" With this shout, there seemed to be a sudden gust of wind and clouds surging behind him. The sword spirit turned a deaf ear to him and continued to run. But the next moment, the wind and clouds suddenly gathered in front of him. The spiritual energy of the world fluctuated wildly. In an instant, it formed a collapsing field. The sword spirit shouted, "Oh no!" Then, four big words appeared in front of him. The spiritual energy of the world and the wind and clouds in the sky gathered together to form four big words, which came crashing down on him. Each character was dozens of feet tall and dozens of feet wide. They came from 3 different directions, carrying with them a thunderous, destructive aura as they crashed down with a rumbling boom. They were the 4 words that Yi Wangran shouted just now. "Give me, stop, down. I've been busy for the whole day. Tomorrow is an important day. Aunt Feng's birthday. What makes me most speechless is that I've been framed." A brother gave Aunt Feng his own account as a gift, and even attached a link to it. I can imagine what this is for. God knows what kind of misery I've been in for the entire afternoon. Run away in tears. Chapter 879. For big words came down with a loud bang. The sword spirit roared. With the calamity sword in his hand, he suddenly launched the move killing the whole world. With a loud sound, a big hole was blasted out between the word stop in front. The sword spirit controlled Chu Yang's body to pass through this hole and fly rapidly. But with this delay, Yi Wangran had already caught up to him within 1,000 feet. Net of nets. No matter where you go, don't think of escaping. Yi Wangran roared again. 11 big words came down in front of him again. The sword spirit broke through again and shouted, "Yi Wangran, if you don't go back now, your Yi clan members will all be killed." Yi Wangran laughed with grief and indignation. "Even if they're all killed, don't think of surviving." The sword spirit ran away speechlessly. This guy is crazy. 2 figures, one in front and one behind, were flying rapidly in the air. It could be seen that Yi Wangran was getting closer and closer to the figure in black in front. The distance between them was getting shorter little by little. This was the sword spirit. If it were any other martial saint expert, he would have already been captured by Yi Wangran. No matter where the sword spirit level appeared, all of them were wonderful beyond compare. But the gap between him and the opponent was really too big. No matter what, he couldn't get rid of the opponent. Yi Wangran was already mad with anger. He was actually fooled like this. This was simply a great humiliation. The sword spirit had a clear goal. He had to rush to the Shao clan's camp no matter what. There were no supreme martial artists in other places, but there must be in the Shao clan's camp. The sword spirit controlled Chu Yang's body to sway in the air. With a whoosh, 3 figures appeared and dashed in 3 directions. Yi Wangran roared and launched 3 consecutive palms. The 3 figures were instantly smashed into space fragments. The distance between them and the sword spirit was also pulled apart by 100 feet. Stop! 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 Yi Wangran roared 5 times in a row. The spiritual aura in the air surged. The wind and clouds were turbulent, and 5 big mountains appeared consecutively in front of the sword spirit. The sword spirit had no choice but to activate the power of his divine soul and launch the calamity sword to rush over. Net of nets, high up in the sky, it was a marvelous sight. Numerous misty mountains suddenly appeared, and then a stream of light suddenly rushed in, smashing a large hole in the misty mountain, and quickly went out. Behind it, a similar black shadow chased after it like lightning, one in front and one behind, like 2 connected black lines. After the 2 of them passed by, the misty mountains behind them began to crumble, letting out thunderous sounds, and then dark clouds began to gather. In front of them was a clear sky with white clouds drifting about. Behind them, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. It formed a peculiar landscape. It was getting closer and closer. Only 800 feet left. Only 700 feet left. Only 500 feet left. Suddenly, the sword spirit's body tensed up. He heard that Yi Wangran seemed to be taking a deep breath behind him. In an instant, there was a feeling of the air being sucked dry, as if the space behind him had completely turned into a bottomless black hole. The sword spirit roared, and his body swayed for a while. Then, the sword light suddenly bloomed into a peacock that spread its wings and was about to fly. At the same time, Yi Wangran, who was behind him, punched out. From the position where he punched out to 300 feet in front of the sword spirit, a dark passage suddenly appeared. It was a full 100 feet wide and a full 100 feet tall. At this moment, the sword spirit's sword light had turned into a peacock and flown up. Most of the peacock's body had already flown out, and it was only a little bit away from completely flying out of the black hole. But it was finally affected. With a snap, the peacock formed by the sword light suddenly scattered in the air. It turned back into a black-clothed figure again and flew forward. The sword spirit was controlling Chu Yang's body. This blow didn't cause much harm to Chu Yang's body, but to the sword spirit's divine soul, it was a great impact. Chu Yang even clearly felt the sword spirit's weakness at the moment of impact. Net of nets. Ever since Chu Yang got the calamity sword and possessed by the sword spirit, he had never seen the sword spirit being so weak in a battle. The sword spirit roared, and suddenly said hurriedly, "There's still 17,000 feet left to the Shao clan's camp. I'll use a secret method to burn my divine soul, and rush there in an instant to get rid of him. Then I'll have to rest. You take over the body, and act according to the situation." Chu Yang said, "Okay, I'll hold him back." The sword spirit smiled lightly. The next moment, his body suddenly emitted a blazing white light, and then he suddenly accelerated, flying forward at a speed more than 10 times faster than before. Yi Wangran was shocked. In his eyes, the black figure in front of him suddenly accelerated, and then disappeared in the sky in the blink of an eye at a speed that he couldn't catch up with. "Burn your divine soul?" Yi Wangran snorted coldly. "Do you think you can run away after burning your divine soul? The Shao clan's camp is in front of you." He chased after the sword spirit with a murderous look. In the Shao clan's camp, everyone's eyes were fixed on the strange scene in the sky. Some of the more experienced and knowledgeable people had already guessed. This must be a battle between 2 peerless experts in the sky. Before they finished speaking, a black-clothed figure suddenly fell from the sky with a sharp sound. When they first saw him, he was just a small black dot, but then he turned into a person and landed in the camp. With a loud bang, dust and smoke filled the air. "Who's there?" Everyone shouted in unison, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. But this black-clothed man had already shouted anxiously, "Quickly get out of the way and hide! Yi Wangran is coming." Hearing this sentence, the Xiao clan instinctively thought, "Is this person one of us?" Then, they realized the seriousness of this matter. Yi Wangran is coming? He's a supreme martial artist. How can we resist him? The black-robed man's body flashed, and he entered a thicket. Then he disappeared. Everyone still wanted to ask, but they saw a figure falling rapidly from the sky. With a hideous smile he said, "The Xiao clan's camp? Do you think I won't be able to find you after you enter the camp?" Suddenly, with a loud bang, he landed on the ground. The strong shock caused all the tents in the Xiao clan's camp to fly up into the air at the same time. Many of the Xiao clan's experts were also sent flying at the same time, turning into flying people in the air. More than 10 people were sent flying up into the air uncontrollably and vomited blood in the air. Yi Wangran waved his hand, and his sleeves rolled up in the air. Instantly, the dust and smoke disappeared completely. His eagle-like eyes looked at everyone in front of him slowly, and he shouted, "Come out!" 8 people lined up in a row like 8 iron towers, solemn and mighty. They strode out. "Senior Yi," Yi Wangran said angrily. "Who's the one who pretended to be mysterious just now? Come out." The 8 people looked at each other and asked, "May I know which one Senior Yi is referring to?" Yi Wangran flew into a rage. "How would I know which one? Why, your Xiao clan doesn't dare to admit what you've done?" The 8 people were confused at the same time. The leader was also an 8th-stage martial saint. He was usually proud and arrogant. Now that he was reprimanded by Yi Wangran like this, he couldn't bear it. He sneered and said, "I don't understand what you're talking about." Yi Wangran smiled. "I'll let you understand." Suddenly, he stretched out his hand and grabbed this person's neck from hundreds of feet away. He pulled him over and shouted, "Do you understand now? Third elder brother. Third master." The others were shocked. They rushed up anxiously at the same time. But that third master was a tough nut to crack. Although he was grabbed by Yi Wangran, he was still unyielding. He forced himself to breathe and sneered. "Why, Senior Yi, do you dare to kill people? This is the southeast region." This sentence completely annoyed Yi Wangran. Yi Wangran laughed wildly. "Your Xiao clan lured me away. But could it be that you've done something good to my people? You dare to kill people, but do you think I don't dare to? Third master of the Xiao clan." Hee. As he said, the murderous look on his face became more and more intense. He wanted to pinch this person to death. "Yi Wangran, stop!" With a shout, a dignified old man in brocade clothes with long eyebrows and phoenix-like eyes suddenly appeared in front of Yi Wangran. He said lightly, "What happened? Why Master Yi of the Yi clan, who's said to be unshakable, actually became so furious?" His words were filled with a mocking tone. And he wasn't afraid of Yi Wangran at all. Obviously, he was a figure of the same generation as Yi Wangran. "Fifth Master Xiao, it turns out that you're secretly in charge of this operation." Yi Wangran looked at the old man in brocade clothes in front of him, and said slowly, "No wonder the Xiao clan acted so insidiously and viciously this time." Fifth Master Xiao said heavily, "Put down Third Master Xiao first. What exactly happened? It actually made you so furious." Yi Wangran laughed. His eyes flashed fiercely and he shouted, "No need to say anything more. Hand over that person just now." Fifth Master Xiao was stunned. "Who?" Yi Wangran was furious. "You're still pretending to be a fool." Yi Wangran finally tore off his mask in front of his peers aggressively. Fifth Master Xiao's face was cold. He turned back and asked, "Who came in just now? Where is he?" Yi Wangran just sneered. He looked at Fifth Master Xiao, as if he was watching a play. Someone said, "Just now a man in black came in." Before he finished speaking, Fifth Master Xiao had already shouted, "Where is he? Ask him to come out." Everyone hurriedly searched for him, but what could they find now? After searching for a long time, the final report was that there was no such person. Yi Wangran was already trembling with anger. Fifth Master Xiao faced Yi Wangran and said heavily, "Brother Yi, this is a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Yi Wangran was so angry that he laughed. He shook that Third Master Xiao in his hand and laughed harshly. Now that things have come to this, Fifth Master Xiao, you're telling me that this is a misunderstanding? Fifth Master Xiao took a step forward and said seriously, it's indeed a misunderstanding. You have to believe me. Yi Wangren laughed with grief and indignation. Fifth Master Xiao, what did you do to my family when I wasn't around? This isn't a misunderstanding, right? Fifth Master Xiao was stunned. Brother Yi, why do you say this? How can I be such a despicable person? Yi Wangren nodded slowly. You didn't do it, right? Fifth Master Xiao said angrily. Of course not. Yi Wangren nodded slowly and said word by word. Then come with me. I don't care about my face today. Come on. Fifth Xiao Supreme Xiao. Chapter 880. Yi Wangren picked up this third master of the Xiao family and stood up. This third master of the Xiao family was called Xiao Luoyu. His real cultivation had reached the martial saint level. He was the leader of the Xiao clan's team this time. At this moment, he was held in Yi Wangren's hand in humiliation. His face was purple and swollen, and he wished he could bite his tongue to commit suicide. But he couldn't move at all. Fifth master of the Xiao clan, and the rest didn't hesitate. They stood up and followed closely. Fifth master of the Xiao clan was very depressed. He was a senior expert of the Xiao clan, and was of the same generation as Yi Wangren. Among the same generation, there was naturally a ranking system. But in the clan, he was also an ancestor-level figure. Otherwise, wouldn't the Xiao clan be in a mess with so many fifth masters of the Xiao clan? This fifth master of the Xiao clan was called Xiaozhen. His cultivation wasn't any weaker than Yi Wangren's. But now, he didn't know what was going on at all, and was confused. This time, when the Yi clan suddenly attacked, the Xiao clan was forced to fight back. They were already in a muddle. It wasn't until seventh master of the Xiao clan woke up that they more or less understood what was going on. Since the Yi clan had sent Yi Wangren, the Xiao clan naturally had to send Xiaozhen. In this way, the two clans were evenly matched. And Xiaozhen also knew that although the Xiao clan was furious about seventh master of the Xiao clan's injury, it wasn't to the point of being irreconcilable. So Xiaozhen knew very well this time. Big clans always needed to train their soldiers. Presumably, the Yi clan also thought so. Since they came, everything had indeed gone according to their plan. Both sides fought with real weapons, but they weren't fighting to the death. Instead, they seemed to be training their killers. The killers of the two clans kept attacking and looking for opportunities. Although there were deaths, it didn't matter much. How could there be no casualties in the martial world? Even if they were sleeping on the bed, they might even die if they fell off the bed. But now, Yi Wangren directly rushed into the Xiao clan's camp while shouting. This made Xiaozhen extremely furious. Everyone knows what's going on. Why do you have to be so agitated? Besides, you said that the people who were fighting in the sky just now were from the Xiao clan. I also wanted to say that they were from the Yi clan. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that the person who fought with you in the sky was definitely not a supreme martial artist. But with your supreme martial artist ability, you've been entangled in the battle for such a long time, and still haven't taken him down. In the end, you even chased him all the way to our Xiao clan's camp. Do you, Yi Wangren, think that we're all fools? Xiaozhen followed closely behind Yi Wangren all the way. He secretly made up his mind. If Yi Wangren doesn't give me an explanation for this matter, I'll definitely be punished. He absolutely could not let this matter rest. Yi Wangren galloped all the way, and arrived at the Yi clan's campsite in less than 10 minutes. He looked down from the sky and instantly shouted. His internal organs felt as if they were burning, and he almost fell from the sky. He cried out in pain. Xiao Wu, look at what your Xiao clan has done. Fifth Master Xiao glanced over, and was instantly stunned. His scalp instantly went numb. The Yi clan's campsite was in a state of chaos, as if a great battle had just taken place. Among the 200 or so people, there were more than 100 who were lying on the ground, rolling and screaming in pain. Some had their legs broken, some had their arms broken. There were all kinds of strange injuries on his body. On the side, there were 8 people lying quietly. These 8 people were all stained with blood. They were all stained with blood, and anyone with a discerning eye could tell that these 8 people were definitely not alive. Yi Wangren roared. He flew down like lightning. What's the matter? The person who came up was the Yi clan's fourth master, Yi Wutian. He was limping, his face was full of blood, and his arm hung weakly on one side of his body. His face was full of resentment. Elder, it's done by the Xiao clan. This sentence made Xiao Zhen and the others, who came down after him, tremble. They were stunned. We did it. Did we do it? Yi Wangran's face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. He tried his best to suppress the anger in his heart and asked in a low voice, Wutian, how are the casualties? Yi Wutian looked at him in a daze. Suddenly he burst into tears. He wailed like a child, and tears flowed down his face. Yi Wangran's heart sank. Say it. Wuqian is dead. Wuqian is dead. Yi Wutian cried like a child. Elder Wuqian, he was killed by two people in front of me. I. He thumped his chest and stamped his feet. I tried my best to save him. But the people who came were all saint-level experts, or even higher. If we didn't fight desperately, I'm afraid I might not have survived. Yi Wangran's heart skipped a beat. He grabbed him. Are you sure it's done by the Xiao clan? Absolutely, Yi Wutian said loudly with grief and indignation. If I'm lying, I'll be struck by lightning. Although those three people tried their best to cover it up. The autumn wind and autumn rain sword is the signature of the Xiao clan. Although they tried their best to cover it up, they couldn't hide it from my eyes. As he said, he knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. Elder, please take revenge for us. Wuqian's body hasn't even turned cold yet. Yi Wangran suddenly turned around and looked at Xiao Zhen. Fifth Master Xiao, what do you say? Facing Yi Wangran's blade-like eyes, Xiao Zhen couldn't help but take a step back. He hurriedly said, Brother Yi, I can guarantee that this matter is definitely not done by our Xiao clan. Xiao Zhen knew that if this matter was confirmed to be true, they would be in big trouble. But before he could finish his sentence, he heard a cracking sound. His body couldn't help but tremble. He stared at the sound. He saw that third master Xiao Luoyu, who had been held in Yi Wangran's hands all this while, had his neck softly tilted to one side. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His face was ashen, and he was no longer breathing. Just like this, he was held in Yi Wangran's hands like a broken cloth bag. Xiao Zhen suddenly raised his head and looked at Yi Wangran. He shouted furiously, Yi Wangran, you! He never thought that Yi Wangran's means would be so resolute. Yi Wangran looked at him coldly and didn't retreat. His left hand was still holding Xiao Luoyu's corpse. He shook it and smiled sinisterly. Then in a very interesting voice he gritted his teeth and said, Xiao Zhen, do you feel heartache? Do you feel very angry? Do you? Xiao Zhen gritted his teeth. Yi Wangran, do you want our two clans to fight to the death? Yi Wangran shook his shoulders and made a fearful expression. I'm so scared of you. Then, he suddenly put on a stern face and gritted his teeth. Xiao Zhen, I'm so scared of you. I'm so scared of you. Xiao Zhen's face was distorted by his words. Although Yi Wangran said, I'm so scared of you, everyone could hear the viciousness and disdain in his tone. The 7 people of the Xiao clan stood behind Xiao Zhen. Their faces were as cold as frost. Opposite them, Yi Wangran stood upright. Although there was a group of defeated soldiers behind him who had lost the ability to resist, Yi Wangran still stood proudly and coldly. His expression was valiant, and he didn't yield an inch. The atmosphere was like a volcano that was about to erupt. It was oppressive and silent. Nobody dared to speak. Only Yi Wangran and Xiao Zhen had the right to speak. The two of them also didn't speak. At this moment, it was superfluous to say anything. Xiao Zhen originally wanted to explain this matter, but Yi Wangran broke Xiao Luoyu's neck with a crisp snap. This made him immediately realize that no matter how he explained this matter, whether it was done by the Xiao clan or not, it was no longer important to the facts at this moment. There was no need to explain at all. Yi Wangran, how are you? Your methods are so clean. Xiao Zhen nodded and looked at Yi Wangran with a malicious gaze. He nodded again and turned to leave. Now that this matter had come to this, he must report it to the clan. No matter what, he and Yi Wangran couldn't fight here. Once they fought, he wouldn't be able to kill Yi Wangran, and Yi Wangran wouldn't be able to kill him either. But none of the people from the Xiao clan and the Yi clan who were here today would be able to survive. When he fought with Yi Wangran could find countless opportunities to kill all the people on his side. He wouldn't be able to protect them. Similarly, if he wanted to kill them, Yi Wangran wouldn't be able to protect them either. Although many of these people were martial saint experts, even if there were 100 of them at the peak of martial saint level, they would only be killed by a first-stage supreme martial artist, whose realm hadn't stabilized yet. The martial saint level's divine sense was just a divine sense, but the divine sense of a supreme martial artist was already close to the great Tao. This was a qualitative difference. So Xiaozhen didn't want to stay here any longer. But when he was about to leave, he was stopped by Yi Wangran. Wait! Yi Wangran still gritted his teeth lightly. He raised his head and looked at Xiaozhen disdainfully. He said gloomily, "Xiaozhen, are you leaving now?" Xiaozhen didn't turn back. He said in a low voice, "What do you want?" Yi Wangran let out a strange laugh like an owl. 8 people on my side have died. I've only killed 1 on your side. Don't you think this is very unfair? Even the leading figure of our Shao clan has died in your hands. Even if you don't say it, the enmity between our 2 clans can no longer be resolved. You still want a yard after taking an inch. Xiaozhen was furious. Yi Wangran gritted his teeth. The ones who died on my side aren't ordinary people either. Your Shao clan should know who you've killed. He's called Yi Wuchen. He's the 8th son of the last generation of our Yi clan. He's only 50 years old, but he's already a martial saint. Do you know what this means? Xiaozhen sneered. Yi Wangran, I'm going to take them away now. If you want to kill them, go ahead. If you don't want to bury all your Yi clan members in this black pine forest, I won't be stingy with these few lives of my Shao clan members. After saying that, he didn't turn back but walked forward. His voice was full of murderous intent. If Yi Wangran dares to kill them, I'll make sure that none of the Yi clan members who are here can return. He was sure that Yi Wangran wouldn't dare to kill them. He was sure that since Yi Wangran had already lost Yi Wuchen, he wouldn't bear the risk of losing Yi Wutian as well. But Xiaozhen was wrong again this time. Yi Wangran had already been humiliated enough tonight. He was deceived by a junior of the Shao clan. His face had been greatly damaged, and he was so ashamed that he couldn't show his face. He was already burning with rage. Now that he saw the juniors he had brought get killed, how could he still bear it? Xiaozhen had only taken 2 steps when he heard Yi Wangran gritting his teeth and saying, "Since you don't care, why should I care?" Chapter 881. Xiaozhen instantly felt that something was wrong. He immediately turned around. However, a black object that was accompanied by a sharp sound of the wind was already rushing towards him. Xiaozhen stretched out his hand and caught the object in his hand. He could tell at a glance that it was Xiao Luoyu's corpse. Xiao Luoyu was already dead. If he smashed his corpse, it would be too much. But Yi Wangran had already transformed into a black gust of wind and rushed into the crowd of the Shao clan. With 2 bangs, 2 martial monarchs of the Shao clan flew into the air and were torn into pieces in midair. Xiaozhen turned around and stood in front of Yi Wangran. Then he punched out. This punch was as heavy as a mountain. It was as if the heavens and the earth were frozen at this moment. The surrounding space was also frozen under this punch. The air no longer flowed. Yi Wangran, do you really want everyone to die? Xiaozhen roared. Yi Wangran let out a shrill howl. Suddenly, the color of the whole night sky changed greatly. I've never seen Yi Wangran in my life. Once I see him, my soul will be shattered. Yi Wangran let out a long howl. His sonorous voice was full of killing intent, with infinite determination and madness. Then let them die together. With his voice, the whole ground suddenly began to collapse and crack. Plumes of smoke rose straight up into the sky. Cracks appeared on the ground. It's the Yi clan that's turning the world upside down. He's crazy. Xiaozhen moved and shouted, "Retreat." Then he shouted, "Yi Wangran, take my move. Mountains and rivers assemble." He stomped on the ground fiercely. With a boom, waves of energy rushed out and gathered the cracked ground under his feet in an instant. His whole body suddenly rose up along with the gathering of the ground. He opened his hands and closed them together. With a whoosh, 2 huge palms appeared in the air at the same time. They came towards Yi Wangran from the left and right. Yi Wangran laughed crazily. "Haha, good. Look at my wind and cloud break. He clasped his hands together and separated them. A jet of black energy was suddenly thrown out. Two powerful streams of energy clashed against each other, and suddenly, a nearly 400 feet wide bottomless abyss appeared between the two of them. Fifth Master Shao. If I, Yi Wangran, want to kill someone, you can't stop me. At the same time, Yi Wangran laughed strangely and flew out rapidly like a big bird. His body flashed a few times, and the screams of the Shao clan could be heard one after another. Net Xiaozhen was filled with grief and indignation, and he shouted, "Then let's compete and see who can kill faster. Let's see if my Shao clan or the Yi clan will die first." At this moment, his body turned into a long rainbow and shot into the Shao clan's defeated army. His two hands separated as he began a massacre. Screams rang out one after another. This dark and gloomy black pine forest, at this moment, had actually become the battlefield of the two supremes. Whether it was the Yi clan or the Shao clan, neither of them had expected this to happen. In just 2 breaths, the two of them had already killed quite a number of people. At this moment, they were shuttling back and forth in the forest, searching for fish that had escaped the net. If you kill me, I can't save them. I can only kill you. Their cultivations were on par with each other, and both of them knew their own limits. These pitiful experts of the Yi clan and the Shao clan were about to die. Suddenly a voice rang out. Stop. This voice was very crisp, and even a little soft. Just by listening to this voice, one could already feel some gentleness. But it was a woman's voice. This voice wasn't loud, but whether it was the furious Yi Wangran or the furious Xiaozhen, both of them stopped as if they had been electrocuted. Yi Wangran's 5 fingers were already on the head of a saint from the Shao clan. But before he could exert any force, he actually retracted the primordial qi that was about to gush out of his palm after this shout. Then, he stopped moving just like that. One of Xiao Zhen's hands had already grabbed Yi Wutian's throat with 3 fingers. He was about to kill Yi Wutian, but when he heard this voice he suddenly stopped. There was complete silence in the air. In fact, the air that was filled with the stench of blood was suddenly filled with a sense of peace and gentleness. The gentle voice asked, "Have the two of you gone mad?" Yi Wangran and Xiaozhen did the same action at the same time. One of them flew to an open area and stood respectfully. They immediately operated their martial arts to disperse the blood, flesh, and murderous aura on their bodies. Net. Then the two of them bent down and said, "Is this Master Feng?" With a deep sigh, a beautiful woman in snow-white clothes suddenly appeared in front of the two of them. She had a slender figure and was extremely beautiful. This woman seemed to be in her 20s. Her hair was like clouds, her figure was tall and slim like a willow, and her eyebrows were picturesque. Just by standing here, the battlefield seemed to have suddenly changed into one that was full of gentleness and compassion, as if the spring breeze had suddenly come to the earth in this early autumn. From the sky to the earth, it was vast and mighty, and it was all intoxicating gentleness. She just stood there quietly, but Yi Wangran and Xiaozhen didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Just a moment ago, the two unparalleled killing gods who wanted to slaughter the world had suddenly become more obedient than little lambs. Only a faint sigh was heard. That woman frowned slightly and said softly, "Why are you doing this?" The two of them lowered their heads and didn't dare to say a word. Even when facing this woman in white, they didn't dare to use their spiritual detection, aura guidance, and divine soul. "Raise your heads," the woman in white said softly. "Yes." The two of them answered at the same time. They still bent down and raised their heads. Only then did they realize that there was another woman beside that woman in white. She had the same beautiful hair, the same outstanding beauty, and the same peerless elegance. It was just that this woman's face was a little childish, but her eyes were calm and quiet. Faintly, there was even a hint of power and disdain. This other woman was dressed in black. The expression on his face was ice cold. She was like a piece of ice that refused to melt. Any man who wanted to get close to her would only get frostbite. "It's rare that you still recognize me. I'm Feng Yuro." The white-clothed woman's eyes were like dots of paint. She quietly looked at the two of them. Her voice was still gentle, low, and delicate. "Master Feng's name is well known in the world. How can we not know you?" Yi Wangran and Xiaozhen broke out in cold sweat at the same time. Are you still willing to listen to me? Feng Yuro frowned slightly and said, I'm no longer a law enforcement officer. No matter when, we'll carry out Master Feng's words to the end. The two of them answered in unison. Then don't fight anymore. Feng Yuro said softly, so many people have died. It's quite uncomfortable. Go back home. She said to Xiaozhen, go back and tell Xiaosei. Xiaozhen said respectfully yes. Feng Yuro looked at Yi Wangran and said softly, you tell Yi Di. Yi Wangran lowered his head and said respectfully, yes. There's one more thing that I need the two of you to spread. Feng Yuro rubbed her forehead and actually smiled slightly. She pulled the woman in black over and let her stand beside her. She said softly, this is my new disciple. His surname is Wu, Wu as in dark clouds. The two of them shuddered and said loudly at the same time, congratulations, Master Feng. Congratulations, Master Feng. You finally have an ideal successor. It's worthy of celebration. If the world knows about this, it'll definitely be a great celebration. Then they turned to the woman in black. Congratulations, Miss Wu. You've met a great teacher today. It's only a matter of time before you become the leader of the Ming dynasty. The woman in black calmly bowed and politely said, thank you for your congratulations. Then, she took a step back and stood one step behind Feng Yuro. Feng Yuro smiled satisfactorily and said quietly, I heard that it's not peaceful here, so I specially came over to take a look. By the way, I can also take a look at the mountains and rivers in the southeast. He also wanted to come over, but I met two people over there. I don't like those two people, so I left first. When she said he, she actually felt a little uncomfortable, like an unmarried girl talking about her lover. Her white jade-like face also blushed a little. It turns out that Master Yu is also coming. Xiaozhen and Yi Wangran shuddered at the same time. Sweat appeared on their foreheads, and they felt weak all over. They had already started to feel grateful to the gods and Buddhas. Fortunately, it's the wife who came today, not the husband. If Yu Lingxue came and saw the two of them killing innocent people, their lives would probably come to an end. Drunk on Yu Lingxue's weakness, listening to Feng Yuro's gentleness. Who would have thought that these two lines, which were full of poetic and picturesque feelings, actually represented such terrifying characters? Qianqian's aptitude is not bad. Both of us like her very much. Feng Yuro's face was full of joy when she talked about her new disciple. She said, so Lingxue also won't accept any more disciples. That is to say, Qianqian is the successor of both of us. Yi Wangran and Xiaozhen shuddered and raised their heads. They were tongue-tied. When they looked at this girl in black again, there was actually some admiration in their eyes. There was even some reverence in their eyes. What's the background of this girl? She's actually accepted as a disciple by both Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro. This is simply inconceivable. When the two of you go back, tell the lords of your clans that in the future, if you meet my disciple in the martial world, you must take care of him or her. If someone's killed by my disciple, we'll be very angry, Feng Yuro said seriously. She would actually be very angry if someone was killed by her disciple. What kind of saying is this? But Yi Wangran and Xiaozhen felt that it was natural. They nodded like pecking rice. Yes, yes. By the way, tell some lecherous men in your clans not to have any ideas about my disciple. My disciple is too beautiful. I'm very worried, Feng Yuro said worriedly. Whichever clan has such a beautiful disciple, prepare to let Xiaosei or Yi Di come to apologize. Or, both of us can go to your clans together to greet them. The two of them broke out in cold sweat. This was the most important thing. Now, the two of them couldn't stay here any longer. They really had to guard against this matter. Which clan didn't have lecherous men? Second update. Begging for monthly votes. I'm going out with my wife to buy some things. I'll drink some wine at night, and write my story after drinking. So if there's any update, it'll be at night. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning to write my story. So far, I've only written 2 chapters. Haha, I'll write 2 chapters first. Seeing that everyone left their blessings in the book review and comment section, my wife was very emotional and tearful. She said that this was the first time so many people celebrated her birthday. Sister Feng and I have been through a lot, and we almost became strangers. Previously, I kept it from everyone because at that time, I didn't know what our future would be. I had no confidence at all. So, it's not easy for us to get to where we are today. It's a long story. Chapter 882. Part 7 Chapter 158, where the heart lies. Yi Wangran and Xiaozhen's hearts were beating like drums. Author's note: the author of this novel is a Chinese novel. This younger brother of Master Feng was so beautiful. Even the two of them couldn't help but feel amazed by her beauty, not to mention a young and vigorous teenager. If she was seen by a playboy in the clan, it was absolutely inevitable that he would have some dirty thoughts or flirt with her. But if the elder of the clan had to go and apologize personally because of this, firstly, this would be too unjust. Secondly, when the elder came back to apologize, the whole clan would probably lose a layer of skin. Especially that troublemaker. He would probably become the punching bag of the dozens of generations of the clan's ancestors. This generation would never be able to make a comeback, and they wouldn't even be able to die. After we go back, we'll definitely strictly instruct our clans to prevent such a situation from happening again. The two of them broke out in cold sweat. At the same time, they thought of one thing. If a certain daring person was their direct descendant, then they thought of the strict clan rules of their elder and instantly shuddered. Okay. Feng Yuro nodded quietly and said, during this period of time, we'll bring our disciples to play in the southeast. Don't make such a big fuss between the two of you. Such a beautiful scenery will be ruined by you. Then, we won't be able to enjoy it anymore. Yes. We won't fight. The two of them nodded repeatedly, their foreheads full of cold sweat. For example, this black pine forest. Alas, how will we play in the future? Feng Yuro frowned slightly and said, I like scenery. The mountains are beautiful, the earth is magnificent, the water is clear, and the flowers are lush. If I don't have the interest to play, I'll be unhappy. But if he's unhappy, then your two clans will be a little uncomfortable. The two of them nodded repeatedly. They thought, actually, Yu Lingshua's unhappiness is secondary, because he's unhappy only because of one person. But it's more terrifying if you're unhappy. Because if you're unhappy, Yu Lingxua will be even more unhappy than himself. Then, both of you will be unhappy together. That'll be really terrible. Feng Yuro frowned. Let's go. The smell here is too unpleasant. She turned and said, Qianqian, follow me. His white robe fluttered as he quietly flew up like an immortal. Behind him, Wu Qianqian, who was dressed in black, also followed. The two graceful figures disappeared in the blink of an eye. The two supreme martial artists heaved a sigh of relief at the same time, and almost sat down on the ground. It's really dangerous, said Yi Wangran. Yeah, that was close. Xiaozhen wiped his sweat. Fortunately, it's Feng Yuro, and not Yu Lingxua. Yi Wangran still had lingering fears. Feng Yuro is famous for her good temper and gentleness. However, this disciple of hers is not gentle at all. She has a murderous aura all over her body. Although her cultivation is so low, she naturally has the aura of a superior, bossy and arrogant, with a feeling of looking down on the world. If she grows up, she will definitely be another Yu Lingxua, or even stronger. Yu Lingxua and Feng Yuro are working together to teach little brother. My God, how could such a thing happen? Xiaozhen sighed. The two sighed at the same time. Then, Yi Wangran suddenly came to his senses. He jumped out and said angrily, Xiaozhen, we'll definitely settle today's scores with you in the future. Xiaozhen shouted, Yi Wangran, on account of Master Feng, I'll let you off today. As they spoke, the two of them were a little embarrassed. Then they snorted heavily. One went to the east, and the other went to the west. They parted ways. The Yi clan and the Xiao clan couldn't fight for the time being. And because Feng Yuro and Yu Lingxua were in the southeast during this period of time, the Xiao clan and the Huang clan could only stop fighting for the time being. But even if they couldn't fight here, it didn't mean that they couldn't fight in other places. It's a small world, and people will eventually travel everywhere. Feng Yuro's sudden appearance extinguished the storm that Chu Yang had prepared for a long time. On the surface, Feng Yuro's appearance had rendered all the plans that Chu Yang had prepared for a long time useless. But who could say for sure whether this was a good thing or a bad thing for Chu Yang? An open spear had turned into a hidden arrow, and an open flame had turned into a hidden flame buried underground. Once the storm blew, it could start a prairie fire again. No matter what, the people who died today couldn't be resurrected. Then the seeds of hatred had been planted. Martial Yin Yang update. And, as the sword spirit had said earlier, even if you create an irreversible chaos in the heavenly layer, what can you do with your current strength? On the other side, Feng Yuro brought Wu Qianqian and strolled in the forest. Wu Qianqian followed behind her. Her eyes were a little excited, but also a little dazed. Following such a powerful master was of course a smooth journey, but her future was destined to be filled with great responsibilities. But at the same time, she was also a little dazed about her future. The more powerful the master was, the heavier the responsibility, because the honor of the sect was integrated with her bloodline the moment she became a disciple. Wu Qianqian could be defeated and die, but the disciples of Yu Lingxue and Feng Yuro couldn't be defeated and die. Become stronger. She had to become stronger to protect the sect's honor. Only by becoming stronger could she really help. Chu Yang. Chu Yang. Thinking of this name, Wu Qianqian felt a sharp pain in her heart. She subconsciously pinched the leg of the black robe she was wearing. On the surface, it looked smooth, but when he touched it with his hand, there were slight bumps. Wu Qianqian knew what it was. Chu Yang, Qianqian likes you. This was the robe she made for Chu Yang. After Chu Yang left, King of Helchu's robe was made by Wu Qianqian herself. Every time she made a robe, she couldn't help but use her hair as a needle and thread to embroider the same few words on the robe. Only when she was wearing such a black robe could she feel that she was still connected to Chu Yang. Chu Yang was still by her side. Just like a year ago, when Butian Pavilion was just established, Chu Yang and she sat opposite each other at a table. Whether it was the way of dealing with people or scheming, whether it was the arrangement of small schemes, or the general situation of the world, whether it was the observation of people's hearts or political analysis, whether it was the mountains and rivers, or the heavenly palace, Chu Yang would explain and explain everything to her in detail. He seemed to be talking casually, and she seemed to be listening casually, but she knew that he was talking with his heart, and he also knew that she was listening with her heart. Wu Qianqian sighed softly in her heart. That pair of sharp and calm eyes seemed to appear in front of her. Chu Yang's eyes were sometimes very gentle like autumn water, sometimes very cold like a vulture, sometimes very sharp like a sword, sometimes very painful like a deep pool, sometimes very intense like a raging wave, sometimes very blank like an empty void. It was that pair of eyes that often reflected thousands of emotions and 10,000 kinds of expressions, slowly entangling and surrounding Wu Qianqian until she was immersed in it and couldn't come out. Her heart fell. Chu Yang left, and she took over the position of King of Helchu. Every time she handled a matter, she felt that Chu Yang was more outstanding. He had already laid a good foundation, but there were still some things that she didn't do properly. She was overcautious. Then, how much pressure did he have to face when he handled the same matter? What kind of courage did he have? How much mental effort did he have to expend? She only knew how knowledgeable Chu Yang was when she came to the upper three heavens. He had already explained everything clearly, including the current situation of the great ruling clans. He had jokingly mentioned it at that time. A mountain can't accommodate two tigers, not to mention that the great rulers don't have a middle venerable. The great clans are definitely scheming against each other. There were as many heavenly layer experts as there were clouds, and there was no end to it. Chu Yang also said that at that time. Who knows how big this world is, and what kind of experts there are? What kind of experts can dominate the world? This is all a mystery. Without reaching a certain level, one will never know the level above. The king level of the lower three heavens is the heavens, but what about the lower three heavens? What about the upper three heavens, where all the elites are gathered? What about the legendary monarch level and saint level? What about the supreme level? Who knows if there is no one above the supreme level? There is no end to the heavens, so how can there be an end to Tao? Since there is no end, what is the end? Wu Qianqian thought about what Chu Yang said at that time, and she was actually a little dazed. Chu Yang, you know so much. Chu Yang, Qianqian misses you so much. Chu Yang, where are you? Wu Qianqian did not expect that at the moment when she and Feng Yuro stepped into the black pine forest, Chu Yang, dressed in black, had also silently exited the black pine forest. To a certain extent, she and Chu Yang had brushed past each other. She was going in the direction that Chu Yang came from, or she might have deviated. But Chu Yang was going in the same direction that Wu Qianqian came from, and he definitely did not deviate. The two of them were taking the same route, but they were going in opposite directions. It could not be said that this was a pity. For lovers, it could not be said that this was a kind of sorrow. Feng Yuro walked in front quietly. She was a gentle and graceful woman. She felt that her disciple seemed to be a little distracted, but she did not say anything, and only sighed slightly in her heart. This younger brother's talent was beyond her expectations. His wisdom was also beyond Yu Lingshua's expectations. His perseverance and temperament were also beyond their expectations. His cultivation speed was so fast that it made them even more overjoyed. He could be said to be a rare genius in the heavenly layer for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, the Xianyin energy in her body seemed to be bestowed by the heavens, which was an unexpected surprise and ecstasy. But it was a pity that this younger brother's heart was not in her chest. It was already firmly tied to a young man that she did not want to say the name of. The more she was like this, the more she would be with him for life once she fell in love. The more she was like this, the more infatuated she was with him. The more infatuated she was with him, the more likely it was for her to end up in a tragedy. With Feng Yuro's spiritual power, she did not need to look back, and she could clearly feel the deep longing and sorrow in Wu Qianqian's eyes. Where is your heart drifting? Feng Yuro sighed slightly. Qianqian. Master, I'm here. Thinking of him again? Yes. Who exactly is he? Master, please forgive me, I can't say. Third update. Chapter 883. Silly girl. Feng Yuro reprimanded her softly. Then she said thoughtfully, in this case, it's also good. You have something to worry about, and it's an infatuated and unrepentant love. With this obsession, it's also a good thing for cultivation. This infatuation can guide you step by step into the sentimental heavenly Tao. Sentimental heavenly Tao? Wu Qianqian's eyes lit up. Sentimental heavenly Tao. Feng Yuro looked at Wu Qianqian lovingly and said, people often say that the heavenly Tao is heartless. This sentence is not without reason. The vicissitudes of life, birth, old age, illness, and death, everything is so natural and normal. Even if billions of people in the world suffer at the same time, the heavens will not open its eyes and care. It's just indifferent and emotionless, operating the laws of heaven and earth. Even if your filial piety moves the heavens, even if you're an unparalleled hero, in the eyes of the heavenly Tao, you're just a grain of sand. That's why the heavenly Tao is heartless. Although this saying is reasonable, those who say that the heavenly Tao is heartless have a common characteristic, and that is selfishness. He thinks too highly of himself and his life. He always thinks, if the heavens have eyes, why doesn't it care that I've suffered so much? If the heavens have eyes, why doesn't it kill all the bad guys? In other words, this kind of person thinks too highly of himself. One must know that even if a person's experience is seen by a different person, it's as unconcerned as a pig or a dog. How can you still hope that the heavens will see your experience, care about it, and help you? The heavenly Tao is sentimental. What it cares about is the reproduction of the whole world, and the changes of the whole world, and not one person or thing. What it cares about is the balance of the world. Feng Yuro said, do you understand? Wu Qianqian shook her head in confusion. I'm slow-witted. I only understand half of Master's words. It's best if you understand half of it. Feng Yuro said, then what do you understand? Wu Qianqian said, I only understand that the heavens are the same as me. They have feelings and concerns. Ah. Feng Yuro was a little shocked. Wu Qianqian's words sounded a little childish, and seemed to be nonsense. But in Feng Yuro's ears, it was as if she had been enlightened. Wu Qianqian's words seemed to have opened up a path to heaven and earth in front of her. She had thought that she had reached the end of her martial path, but now, a ray of light had appeared in the distance. Although it was out of reach, it clearly existed. The heavens and I are the same. The heavens and I are the same. I am the heavens. Heaven is me. Feng Yuro's heart skipped a beat. She suppressed the astonishment in her heart and took a deep breath, saying, "You very good. You have to remember what you said today." Wu Qianqian was at a loss. She didn't understand what had happened. She only replied, "Yes." Feng Yuro continued to walk forward and said indifferently, "Qianqian, if one day you reach a high level, but you realize that time is merciless and the person in your heart has already become an old man, or a lonely grave in the wilderness, what will you do?" A sweet look of trust appeared on Wu Qianqian's face. She said in a voice brimming with confidence, "That won't happen, master. He will only walk further and higher than me. He would never be pulled down by me. I had to work 1,000,000 times harder to keep myself from being too far away from him, to the point where I couldn't see his back. I can't let the distance between us widen." Feng Yuro smiled gently and said noncommittally, "You have quite a lot of confidence in him." Wu Qianqian lowered her eyebrows and smiled. "He can't make people not have confidence in him." Feng Yuro smiled. In her opinion, with her and Yu Lingxue working together to teach her brother carefully, and with the assistance of countless heavenly treasures, her brother would definitely not be inferior to anyone. Perhaps in the entire heavens, only the brother of those two old monsters could be compared to him. However, in view of Wu Qianqian's amazing talent, the brother of those two old monsters shouldn't be that strong. In just a few months, Yu Lingxue had used a secret technique to raise Wu Qianqian's cultivation and spirit from the peak of revered martial artist to the 7th stage of martial monarch. This was a result that would make anyone dumbfounded and unable to believe. This kind of improvement was simply against the natural order. Moreover, the couple came to the southeast this time to look for an elixir. If they could get this elixir, the two of them would be able to raise Wu Qianqian's cultivation to the martial saint level in the shortest time possible. With a little experience, she would be able to roam the martial world on her own. Wu Qianqian's sweetheart didn't have a famous teacher to teach him, nor a strong backup, let alone heavenly treasures. He could actually leave Wu Qianqian far behind? Feng Yuro only took this as a joke, but she would never have thought that what Wu Qianqian said was the biggest truth. The master and disciple walked out of the black pine forest and walked along the mountain ridge. Looking at the scenery under the moonlight, Feng Yuro said silently, "Tribulation Sword Master hasn't appeared yet. How can a big clan fall into chaos first?" Suddenly Wu Qianqian asked, "Master, what's the highest realm in this world?" Feng Yuro was startled. "The highest realm?" Wu Qianqian said, "Yes." Feng Yuro said, "There's no highest realm." Wu Qianqian said, "Back then, I heard someone say that supreme martial artists might not be invincible. God knows how many more realms there are above supreme martial artist." Feng Yuro was really shocked this time. She turned around and looked at Wu Qianqian. Her voice was serious. "Who said this?" When Chu Yang met up with Wei Wuyan and the others, they had already arrived at Baisha Ferry. Everyone had been anxiously waiting for him. Seeing Chu Yang, they were all overjoyed. Everyone felt that it was unimaginable that Chu Yang could stop Yi Wangran. They felt that this little brother was full of mysteries. But everyone was rational and didn't ask anything. Wan Renjia was a little excited. He said, "It's going to be lively now. Last night, when we rushed into the Yi clan." "Stop." Chu Yang raised his hand and interrupted him. "Don't talk about this matter again. Don't talk about it at any time, any place, or to anyone. This matter, we don't know about it at all. Understand?" Wan Renjia suddenly realized. He said, "Yes, yes, yes. Always be careful." Wei Wuyan sneered at one side. He looked at Wan Renjia and his two brothers and said contemptuously, "You're not capable enough." Then he stopped. Bao Buhuan said angrily, "Are you saying that we're good at spoiling things?" Wei Wuyan smiled and turned his head away. Wan Renjia, Cheng Duing, and Bao Buhuan glared at Wei Wuyan's back. The atmosphere was tense. Chu Yang had an extreme headache. After the battle last night, the sword spirit's divine soul was seriously damaged. He had to rest for a period of time. Chu Yang didn't need to keep his huge divine soul force, so he let the sword spirit use it to recover his divine soul. Now that they were here, they were far away from danger. But Chu Yang couldn't do anything in the face of these 4 people. These 4 people seemed to be natural enemies. They would quarrel with each other within a quarter of an hour. If Chu Yang wasn't in front of them, they would come to blows. This wasn't a long-term solution. After walking along Baisha Ferry for a few days, this situation became more and more intense. Chu Yang frowned more and more. In these few days, Chu Yang finally realized that Wei Wuyan was nothing. This number 1 blood payer had always been low-key, but Wan Renjie, Cheng Duiying and Bao Buhuan were outlaws. They were lawless, daring, and unscrupulous. Only on the afternoon of the first day, when they met a small horse team, they rushed up and snatched the horses back. Everyone had 1 horse each, but there were still 2 left. Chu Yang didn't have time to stop them. The few men who were beaten off their horses kowtowed and begged for mercy. Then they ran away. On the second day, a horse team escorted a carriage. It was a blood payer organization that had accepted the reward. Wan Renjie was looking at Chu Lu'er, who was very tired from riding a horse and felt sorry for her. Now that he saw the carriage, he immediately rode his horse out. Standing in the middle of the road, he shouted, "Once I see Yinyang Bridge, I'll strike Yinyang Bridge." Before he finished his words, this team of blood payers had already gotten off their horses and knelt down to beg for mercy. Yinyang Bridge? What the heck? This is a living king of hell. Then, when he heard that Wan Renjie wanted a carriage, he even personally invited the person in the carriage to come down. He cleaned the carriage carefully, changed the bedding and mattress, and respectfully sent the carriage over. Wan Renjie didn't feel that there was anything wrong with it. He waved his hands and asked them to get lost. Then he sent Chu Lu'er into the carriage very lovingly. Chu Yang and Wei Wuyan were speechless about this act of banditry. But Wan Renjie and the other 2 were already used to doing such things. They said eloquently, "What's this? Robbing them without killing them is giving them face. If we were in a different position, we would have been chopped into pieces long ago." Cheng Duiying nodded vigorously in agreement. In this world, the weak are prey to the strong. Bao Buhuan strongly agreed. 4th brother, eldest senior brother and 2nd senior brother are right. Wei Wuyan rolled his eyes and didn't say anything. Chu Yang felt that it was inappropriate, so he could only get into the carriage to accompany Chu Lu'er. This was even more impressive. Wan Renjie and the others walked and robbed along the way. When they reached the Baisha ferry, the team had already expanded to more than 10 carriages and hundreds of horses. It was a mighty journey. Seeing such a grand occasion, Chu Yang had to admit, although there was a certain risk in robbery, as long as one was powerful, this was the fastest way to make a fortune. Looking at this mighty team of carriages and horses, in just 3 days, they had already amassed a fortune that ordinary people couldn't amass in a lifetime. Baisha ferry. There were finally some signs of human habitation here. The opposite side was the territory of the Huang clan, and this side was the territory of the Xiao clan. There were ferrymen going back and forth, boats shuttling back and forth, and dozens of people waiting on the shore. Facing such a situation, Wan Renjie actually sighed with emotion like a poet. There's blood and fire over there, and there's singing and dancing over here. Life is really like a game of chess. This sentence made Wei Wuyan laugh on the spot. Chapter 884. Baisha Ferry. The waves of Baisha River surged past. It was right in front of them. It was a full 1,000 feet wide. This ferry was a place where the water flow was relatively gentle. There was a group of people in yellow robes coming and going in a hurry. They were from the Huang clan. There was also a group of people in black coming and going. They were from the Xiao clan. There were many conflicts between the 2 clans now, and they often fought with each other. But at this ferry, they minded their own business. Seeing that a group of big clients had come, 2 people in yellow and 2 people in black came to welcome them at the same time. "Are you going to cross the river?" The man in yellow looked at the 5 people in front of him, and then looked at the more than 130 horses and 15 big carriages behind them. He was a little uncertain. If all these things were to be transported across the river, neither of the two clans would be able to take them all. This was only a small ferry. The four people looked at each other and had an idea in their hearts: cooperate. Nonsense. But we're coming to this barren place to pick out a son-in-law? Wanrenjia rolled his eyes and said rudely, "Elder, you'd better think carefully before you speak," the person in charge of the Shao clan said coldly. Wanrenjia laughed sinisterly. With a slap, the man from the Shao clan, who was 30 feet away, was sent spinning and fell to the ground. "Little bastard. I'll use your face to think carefully." Clanging sounds were heard. No matter if it was the Huang clan or the Shao clan, they all drew out their swords. Wanrenjia crossed his arms and sneered. Cheng Duiying and Bao Buhuan also came forward with a malicious smile. "What's the matter? Do you want to fight?" Seeing that the situation was not good, Chu Yang hurriedly jumped out of the carriage. Divine Dr. Chu was very regretful now. Bringing along these three brothers was simply bringing along three huge troubles. As long as the three of them followed him, even if there was no trouble, they would continue to find trouble. These three guys were eager to see the world in chaos. Besides being very respectful and protective of Chu Yang, they were also somewhat in awe of him. They were also very protective of Chu Luer. As for the others, they didn't care about them at all. They were here to offer him a boat to cross the river. But before he could even finish speaking, they were about to draw their swords and kill him. "Well, everyone, please don't be angry." Chu Yang's black robe was elegant and unrestrained. His face was like jade as he stepped out of the carriage. Everyone's eyes lit up. Chu Yang clasped his hands behind his back and put on the demeanor of a great master. He chuckled and said, "We're all on the same side. Don't misunderstand." As he spoke, he raised his eyes slightly and looked at them at eye level. Although his smile was amiable, it was also aloof. "You are." The man from the Huang clan looked at Chu Yang in bewilderment. "My surname is Chu," Chu Yang said lightly. "Has Huang Xiaoliu recovered from his illness?" "It's Divine Dr. Chu." The burly man from the Huang clan was in awe. He knelt on the ground with his saber. "I didn't know that Divine Dr. Chu had come. I, Huang Dedeo, pay my respects to you." Chu Yang was also stunned. Who would have thought that the Huang family would treat him with such courtesy? "What Divine Dr. Chu?" That man in black got up from the ground and said furiously, "Give me." "Wait, Brother Shao." Huang Dedeo hastily jumped over and pulled him aside. Then he whispered a few words in his ear. The black-clothed man's face was still somewhat indignant. Huang Dedeo whispered a few more words before he finally nodded reluctantly. He waved his hand and left with the man in black. Huang Dedeo came forward respectfully. "Divine Dr. Chu, I've already rented the Shao clan's ship. But if we want to transport all these things over, I'm afraid that we'll have to make 2 trips. Chu Yang said. "It's okay. 2 trips it is." "Huang Dedeo, do you have any intention of taking these horses? There's no harm in leaving a few behind." Huang Dedeo was shocked and said, "I don't dare to." It was unknown what method Huang Dedeo used or what price he paid, but the Shao clan's ship also came close. Everyone worked together and dragged the horses and carriages onto the ship. There were only over 40 horses and 5 carriages left on this side. "We don't want these anymore." Chu Yang waved his hand. "Huang Dedeo, I don't think you'll charge us any fees for escorting us over. You can share these things with your brothers here." Huang Dedeo couldn't refuse, so he could only accept them. The ship pulled up the anchor and sailed to the river. Chu Yang and the others stood on the second deck, leaning against the railing and looking into the distance. They could only see the endless torrential river in the distance. The waves were surging mighty and mighty. Immediately, everyone felt a sense of relief. Chu Luer nestled in Chu Yang's arms and looked at the sky and water in the distance. Her beautiful hair fluttered in the chilly river wind, and her eyes narrowed. No one knew what she was thinking about. After a long time, she said softly, "Big brother, my father, is in such a chaotic martial world every day, in such waves, in such barren hills and turbulent rivers, looking for medicine for me." Her voice was low and soft, but it was actually full of emotions. Chu Yang sighed in his heart and said, "So, you have to get better quickly. Once you're well, the pain and torment of third uncle will be completely gone." Chu Luo nodded heavily. Chu Yang looked at the sky and water and said quietly, "Big brother, do you see it?" Wan Renjie was stunned and asked, "See what?" Chu Yang said, "The torrential river water is unstoppable. It's invincible and naturally annihilates everything. Even if there are mountains and rocks to block it for a while, they can't block it for a long time. Isn't this the same as the principle of martial arts? As long as one's strength is strong, no matter how difficult or dangerous it is, one can always get through it. Because they have no scruples." Wan Renjie was silent for a moment and said, "Fourth brother, what do you mean?" Chu Yang said, "The three of you have just improved your cultivation, so you can't stay by my side. If I'm by your side, you'll miss me. So, you won't be able to improve your spiritual cultivation and reach the supreme martial artist level. Only when you leave me and wander in the boundless world can you understand the supreme martial artist's thoughts step by step and comprehend the essence of this level." Wan Renjie, Cheng Duiying and the other two were all silent. Bao Buhuan said, "But fourth brother, how can we rest assured when you travel alone? At the very least, we have to escort fourth brother to his destination." Chu Yang smiled and said, "In this world, when is life not full of danger? If the three of you want to protect me, then the only way is to protect me until I die of old age." The three of them were silent. "Besides, Brother Wei Wuyan will definitely not be in any danger if he follows me." Chu Yang said lightly, "When the flowers bloom next spring, I'll appear at the medicine banquet of the Zhuge clan." Medicine banquet of the Zhuge clan. Wan Renjie and the other two were shocked. "In this case, after we leave the Huang clan, we'll bid farewell to fourth brother. When the flowers bloom next spring, we'll meet again at the Zhuge clan," Cheng Duiying said resolutely. "Okay," Chu Yang smiled. "Then, you have to take good care of Luer." Wan Renjie looked at Chu Luer with some reluctance. "Don't worry," Chu Yang patted his shoulder. Everyone was silent and stood facing the wind for a long time. The big ship braved the wind and waves and moved forward. After a long time, there seemed to be a wisp of coldness on the river surface. "It's so cold." Chu Luer shrank into Chu Yang's arms. "How can it be so cold in such cold autumn weather?" "It was just cool just now," Chu Yang said puzzledly. "Divine Dr. Chu, be careful. There's an expert crossing the river." Huang Dedeo's shout came from below. Chu Yang looked up again and found that the faces of Wei Wuyan and the others had all turned solemn, and their eyes were fixed on the river below. The coldness was getting stronger and stronger. Chu Yang took a breath and operated his pure yang cultivation to protect Chu Luer. At this moment, a clear voice seemed to be shouting from a very far place. 3,000 miles of ice seal. This voice was very far away, and it was impossible to see where the speaker was. But at this moment, there was a sudden change. A thick white fog suddenly appeared on the river surface that stretched for dozens of miles. "So powerful," Wei Wuyan exclaimed. Under everyone's gaze, the water of the whole river actually made cracking sounds and flowed slower and slower. In just a breath's time, the whole river actually froze into a big block of ice from top to bottom, and the ship of Chu Yang and the others was frozen in the middle of the river. The wind that blew from above was still cool in autumn, with the warmth of the sun. But under their feet, it had already turned into a glacier. Not far away, the river water still had the shape of flowing water just now, but it had already become solid. Even the surging waves had turned into lifelike ice sculptures. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Someone has used a supreme technique to freeze the whole river in an instant. Wei Wuyan's face turned pale. Who actually has such a godly technique? At this moment, everyone had the same thought as Wei Wuyan. Who is this person? Is this person still human? Look over there. Wan Renjie suddenly shouted and pointed his finger. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Chu Yang turned his head and looked over. His eyes also couldn't help but pop out. A faint figure, dressed in white, was gliding slowly on the river surface. The undulating waves that had already turned into solid ice carried this person's body as he glided over from afar. As he glided, his hands were also doing something. This person's speed looked very slow and elegant, but in fact it was extremely fast. In just a moment, He had already arrived in front of everyone. Chu Yang looked over and saw that this figure was actually a young man in snow-white clothes. His black hair was fluttering in the wind. His eyebrows were sword-like, and his eyes were bright. His complexion was fair, and there was a faint smile on his lips. He had an elegant demeanor and stood out from the crowd. As he glided along, he waved his hands repeatedly. Following his gestures, dark red shadows jumped out from the river surface one after another, jumping into his hands and disappearing in the blink of an eye. Within thousands of feet, there were still red shadows coming one after another. No one knew how many there were, but all of them fell into this person's hands and disappeared. This person is collecting the boneless blood fish in the Baisha River. It's said that this fish is unique to the Baisha River. It's a type of fish with pure yin. It's very effective for female cultivators to cultivate cold yin energy. This kind of fish hides deep in the river and is extremely difficult to catch. Once it's alarmed, it will drill into the mud and never be found again. I didn't expect this person to use such a method to collect them. Look at him. He's collecting more than 10 million of them at once. It's really too extravagant. Wei Wuyan sucked in a breath of cold air and said with some fear. Chapter 885. Chu Yang was also shocked in his heart. Boneless bloodfish was a kind of underwater spirit beast. Even if it was 10,000 years old, it would only be the size of a palm. This kind of fish was similar to the divine chi-gathering fish of the Three Stars Divine Clan. The divine chi-gathering fish absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The boneless bloodfish naturally couldn't be compared with the divine chi-gathering fish. But in terms of effect, there was only a difference. The divine chi-gathering fish was extremely rare. One might not even be found in 1,000 years. Although there were many boneless bloodfish, they could only be produced in Baisha River. The boneless bloodfish was cold by nature. As it grew, it absorbed the cold energy of the underwater veins and stored it in its body. The older they were, the more yin qi they had. At a certain point, these boneless bloodfish would use the yin qi to turn into a fluid and fill their bodies, replacing the original bones and fish bones. Their bodies would then transform into a red color. In fact, only then could it be called boneless bloodfish. Generally speaking, it would take at least 300 years for a boneless bloodfish to grow into a red body without any bones. But this person came from the opposite side, flying all over the sky. The number of boneless bloodfish he collected this time was more than 10 million. Perhaps after he collected this time, the boneless bloodfish in Baisha River would be completely extinct within 300 years. Using such a mysterious method to collect the boneless bloodfish, this person was really extravagant. The boneless bloodfish had a miraculous effect on the cultivation of the pure yin body. Seeing so many boneless bloodfish, Chu Yang immediately thought of two people. One was Wu Qianqian, and the other was Mo Qingwu. If these two women had the help of the boneless bloodfish, their cultivation would definitely be twice as fast. Or even more. It was a pity that this person was so powerful that Chu Yang didn't have the ability to snatch the boneless bloodfish from his hands. Besides, Wu Qianqian was in the lower three heavens, while Mo Qingwu was in the upper three heavens. Even if it was in his hands, he could only put it in the tribulation space and wait for an opportunity. Just as he was thinking about it, the man had already arrived in front of him. He stood in the middle of the river and waved his hands. Countless boneless bloodfish jumped out from every corner and fell into his hands like moths to a flame. In the distance, almost invisible to the naked eye, there were still countless boneless bloodfish flying over. This person stood in the middle of the river and collected for a full quarter of an hour. Only when there were no more boneless bloodfish flying out of the river did it finally stop. He turned around and looked at Chu Yang's ship. He smiled faintly and nodded as if to express his apology. Everyone was dumbstruck, unable to react at all. The man waved his hand, and a red light seemed to emerge from his palm. With a splash, the entire river suddenly thawed, and the river water began to surge again. This time, the momentum was even more urgent. The three big boats that Chu Yang and the others were on were immediately washed away by the river water. At this moment, the man smiled and stretched out his hand. The three ships returned to their original positions. It was as if they had not moved at all. The river water rushed under the ships, but it did not affect the ships at all. They did not move at all. The man nodded apologetically and said with a smile, "Please don't take offense. I'm just here to catch a few fish. I'll be done in a moment. Please forgive us for the inconvenience." No one said anything. They thought to themselves, "What's there to understand? We're not idiots. Why would we find trouble with you after you revealed such a skill? As for blaming you, isn't that a joke?" Chu Yang coughed and cupped his fists. "Senior, feel free to do whatever you want. It's also an eye-opener for us." The man laughed and glanced at Chu Yang. Then he turned his head away. Suddenly, he made a sound of surprise and turned back to look at Chu Lu'er, who was in Chu Yang's arms. Then, with a flick of his sleeve, a person floated onto the ship and came to Chu Yang's side. Chu Yang only felt a blur in front of him, and there was another person in front of him. Then, he saw this person reach out and place his hand on Chu Lu'er's wrist. Everyone saw these actions clearly, but everyone felt as if they were in a dream. They could see everything clearly, but they could not move at all. This little girl's constitution is very strange. The man frowned slightly and said, "She also has a purine body, but it's actually damaged. The Coldine energy has spread into her divine soul. She should have died early. How did she survive until now?" Chu Yang's eyes lit up. "Senior, can you cure my sister's illness?" He thought to himself, "This person is undoubtedly an extraordinary person. If he can cure Chu Lu'er's illness, that would be great. It would also save him a lot of effort." The man retracted his hand and pondered deeply. After a while he said indifferently, "I can't cure her." He paused and said, "However, the person who suppressed the pain in her divine soul can cure her." Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat, and he did not dare to say anything more. This person actually discovered the divine soul imprint left by the sword spirit when he treated Chu Lu'er. The man frowned and murmured, "Who is this person?" This person's control over the divine soul has already reached such a shocking level. I'm far inferior to him. He shook his head and looked at Chu Lu'er. He paused and said, "The Coldine energy in her body already carries congenital poison. If her illness is cured and she cultivates poison, she'll be a great material for cultivation." Chu Lu'er's eyes lit up and she asked, "Poison? Is it very powerful?" The man in white smiled brightly. "It's the most powerful in the world." Chu Lu'er smiled happily and looked at Chu Yang. However, she realized that her elder brother's face was gloomy, and he looked a little angry. She couldn't help but stick out her tongue, and didn't dare to speak. The man in white smiled and said, "Although I can't cure her completely, I can help strengthen her physique." As he said that, he raised his hand and hundreds of boneless blood fish appeared in his hand. He reached out and grabbed at the air, and the hundreds of boneless blood fish suddenly exploded. A small transparent ball the size of a thumb appeared in his palm, and its fragrance filled the air. He brought the ball to Chu Lu'er's mouth and said, "Eat it." Chu Lu'er was a little flustered, but she still opened her mouth and swallowed the ball. Then, the man in white pointed at Chu Lu'er's forehead. Chu Lu'er only felt an indescribably comfortable and Coldine energy, quickly circulating in her body, and merging into her dantian. Then, a warm force came from her forehead, and she immediately became drowsy. She swayed a little, and fell into Chu Yang's arms. Her breathing was light, and she fell asleep. Let her sleep for a while. She'll be fine when she wakes up. The man in white looked at Chu Yang and scrutinized him. He said, "You're her elder brother?" Chu Yang said, "Yes." The man in white said, Yes, poor little girl. It's a pity that I've already taken in a younger brother, and her injuries haven't healed. I can't do anything." As he said that, he scrutinized Chu Yang again. With a strange look he said, "Poison doesn't necessarily harm others and oneself. You're a little old-fashioned." Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, "If a beautiful girl cultivates poison, it'll ultimately affect her reputation. It's fine for men like us, but a girl's reputation will be ruined because of this. And she will still have to marry in the future. Who would dare to marry a woman of poison, who can kill thousands of people with just a wave of her hand?" The man in white snorted. No one dares to marry her because they're ordinary people and not worthy of her. Since they're ordinary people, why should we care about their opinions? You must know that the beauty of the right person can only be discovered by the right person. It's enough that only one person appreciates the beauty of a girl in her life. Chuyang thought for a while and said, Elder, you're right. The man in white smiled faintly and said, If you truly love her, give her a future. Let her command the winds and clouds and look down on the world, instead of using your status and love to bind her to an ordinary girl. Chuyang said faintly, Even if she wants a future, she has to be cured first. The man in white looked at Chuyang. After a long time, he smiled faintly and said, Little brother, you're only 18 years old now, but you're already a 4th-grade sword sovereign. Such cultivation is rarely seen since ancient times. You'll have extraordinary achievements in the future. Perhaps we'll have a chance to meet again. He paused and said, Since it's a sword, you must know that a sword needs to be sharpened. Chuyang's heart shook. He muttered, A sword needs to be sharpened. The man in white said quietly, Use experience to sharpen it, use blood to sharpen it, and use human lives to sharpen it. If you don't sharpen it, it's just a piece of iron. Chuyang's face was solemn. He said seriously, Elder, thank you for your guidance. The man in white laughed. He looked at the river and said, It's about time. He tilted his body and fell back into the water. With a low shout, his entire body was suddenly frozen again. He waved his hand, and more red shadows leaped out of the water. After a long time, no more red shadows came out of the water. The man in white laughed and disappeared on the river surface in a flash. The river thawed in an instant and regained its momentum, but no one knew what the man in white did. After thawing this time, the ship didn't get washed away. Instead, it didn't move at all. It continued to sail forward smoothly and actually maintained the speed of inertia. Everyone on the deck was silent. After a long time, Chuyang asked, Who's this person? Wei Wuyan sighed. He looked at Wan Renjia and the other two, whose faces were almost pale, and said, The 3 of them definitely know. Look at how scared they are. Wan Renjia's face turned red, but he shuddered and said, If I'm not wrong, this person is probably the 2nd law enforcement officer in the world. Yu Lingxue. He's also Feng Yuro's husband. Chuyang nodded and said, No wonder you're so scared. Wan Renjia and the other 2 had been enemies with big clans and law enforcement officers all their lives. How could they not be scared when they saw the leader of the law enforcement officers? Moreover, their teacher was once injured by Feng Yuro. The 3 of them blushed and felt embarrassed. Chuyang hugged Chuluer, who was sleeping soundly. He frowned and looked at the place where Yu Lingxue stood just now. He murmured, Yu Lingxue, Yu Lingxue. If a person can have such cultivation, then, where can he not go in this world? If I have such cultivation as Yu Lingxue, I'll have no regrets in this life. Wei Wuyan agreed. The ship continued to move forward. Yu Lingxue had already reached the shore on the other side. In a flash, he appeared on a mountain in the distance. He shouted in a low voice, Ning Tianya, come out. Chapter 886. Following Yu Lingxue's shout, an old man landed lightly in front of him like a cloud. Without waiting for Yu Lingxue to speak, he was already furious. I saw you talking to that person on the ship. That person? Yu Lingxue was stunned. That young man? Yes. Ning Tianya nodded heavily. That bastard was holding a little girl in his arms. Did you see that? Yu Lingxue was confused. What's wrong? Who is that little girl to him? Ning Tianya gritted his teeth. Did you ask? That's his sister. What's wrong? Yu Lingxue felt that Ning Tianya was purely crazy. His words made people confused. Sister? Ning Tianya frowned. Are you sure? Yu Lingxue was furious. Can't I, Yu Lingxue, distinguish the bloodline fluctuations of the same clan? Is it fun to lie to you? So it's his sister. Ning Tianya rubbed his hands and laughed. Damn it, damn it. Yu Lingxue frowned and said, Ning Tianya, what's wrong with you? Ning Tianya sighed. It's a long story. Yu Lingxue snorted and said, You're really lazy. You actually have to ask me to collect a few boneless bloodfish. Ning Tianya rubbed his hands. Take it out, take it out. We'll split it in half. Yu Lingxue raised a finger. Wait. I'll split it with you. But I have to make it clear in advance. This time, I want more than half. You can only take less than half. Ning Tianya jumped up. Why? Because I'm the one who did it, not you. Yu Lingxue squinted. Why, you're not convinced. Let me tell you. If you're not convinced and can't fight, we can fight again. But then you won't have a single fish. So be it. Ning Tianya gave in. A small half is still 150,000 fish. Yu Lingxue was furious. Ning Tianya, you actually counted them one by one. You just stood by and didn't do anything. Ning Tianya sighed. I have my reasons. Yu Lingxue was so angry that he was speechless. He took out the divine qi gathering fish and said, Here you go. Ning Tianya said with a drooling face. Why don't you give me this ring as well? My disciple still lacks a storage ring. Yu Lingxue was furious. Your disciple is lacking? My disciple is still lacking. Do you want these fish? If you want it, then take it. If you don't, then scram. You're so rude. Ning Tianya rolled his eyes. In the end, he still took it and stuffed it into his storage ring. Then, he casually grabbed a piece of purple crystal essence jade pendant from Yu Lingxue's waist and said, Give this to me too. I'll let my disciple play with it. Before Yu Lingxue could react, he had already stuffed it into his arms. Yu Lingxue's handsome face flushed red with anger. You. Ning Tianya clapped his hands and said with a smile, Ha ha. Look at how angry you are, you pretty boy. I've already said that you shouldn't always maintain the appearance of a pretty boy. It's very bad. Ning Tianya, your cultivation isn't number one in the world, but your shamelessness really deserves to be number one in the world. Yu Lingxue gasped for breath and said. He knew that the jade pendant in Ning Tianya's hands was like a meat bun falling into a dog's kennel. He would definitely not be able to get it back. He could only sigh at his bad luck. Why didn't he take protective measures when he met this old bastard? Being shameless is also a kind of cultivation. Hee. During this period of time with Bu Luqing, I've been infected by his shamelessness. Ning Tianya laughed dryly. Have you taken it? Yu Lingxue said angrily. If you've taken it, give me an explanation. Why don't you take action yourself? Ning Tianya sighed. It's not that I don't want to take action. You also saw that young man, right? It's that young man in black, the one holding the little girl. Yu Lingxue said. I saw him. What's wrong? That's his sister. Yu Lingxue suddenly became suspicious. He looked Ning Tianya up and down. I say, old Ning, did you suddenly have a burst of love and actually take a fancy to that little girl? Why are you being jealous here? Bastard. Ning Tianya flew into a rage. You want to measure my character with your petty heart. Then what's going on? Yu Lingxue touched his chin and looked at Ning Tianya with some interest. He took the water bag at his waist and drank a mouthful of water, feeling that it was very satisfying to tease this old thing. That guy is my disciple's sweetheart. Ning Tianya said sadly. Pfft. Yu Lingxue spat a mouthful of water on Ning Tianya's face and coughed repeatedly. Ning Tianya looked at him with grief and indignation. Your disciple, is that so tall? Yu Lingxue reached out his hand and gestured. He asked in disbelief. That little girl's sweetheart? Ning Tianya sighed. Who said she wasn't? Ha ha ha. Yu Lingxue held his belly and laughed. Like teacher, like disciple, haha. Ning Tianya, you're really good at teaching. You yourself fell in love with your big senior sister, who's more than 50 years old, when you were 13 years old. Now your disciple is actually better than you, starting at 12 years old. Bullshit. Ning Tianya's face turned red. At that time, although my big senior sister was more than 50 years old, she looked only 18 years old. But your disciple is only 12 years old. Yu Lingxue emphasized this point. She actually already has a sweetheart, and scared you so much that you don't dare to meet him. You're actually jealous of your disciple at the side. Ha ha ha. How talented. What do you know? There's another story behind this matter. Ning Tianya was angry. Then, he quickly told him about the matter between Chu Yang and Mo Qingwu. He said, she's just a little girl, but she suffered so much. In the whole heavens, there's only one person who loves her, supports her, and thinks about her and everything. If it were your wife, she would have run away with him long ago. Ning Tianya, you bastard. Yu Lingxue was originally nodding repeatedly as he listened. He had some understanding of this matter, and felt that it was pardonable that a 12-year-old girl had a sweetheart. Suddenly, Ning Tianya threw out the last sentence, and he was instantly furious. Take it that I said something wrong. Ning Tianya raised his hands in surrender, knowing that Feng Yuro was really Yu Lingxue's only reverse scale, and couldn't be touched. He hurriedly apologized. Yu Lingxue's anger still hadn't subsided. Get lost. Ning Tianya chuckled. Okay, I'll get lost. With a whoosh, he disappeared without a trace. In midair, his muttering could be heard. You really can't take a joke. You're still as boring as before. Yu Lingxue stood quietly. After a long time, he suddenly smiled and said hatefully, this old bastard who deserves to be cut into pieces. When I'm done with my disciple, I'll go up to Mount Supreme and have a battle with you. The last sentence floated out. After a moment, Ning Tianya's reply could be heard. If you dare to come, I'll let my disciple beat you to death. Yu Lingxue laughed. This shameless bastard. With a flash, he also left. On the other side, Ning Tianya had already reached the sky. In the misty clouds, he looked down at the big ship below. On the big ship, Chu Yang had a conflicted expression. I can't let this little guy see me. Once he sees me, he'll definitely pester me endlessly. Ning Tianya thought. Originally, old Bu and I were already on the verge of death because of that little girl. If we tell her that we saw Chu Yang, then we'll be done for. Ning Tianya made up his mind. He took one last look at Chu Yang on the big ship, and was about to fly away. Right at this moment, on the big ship, Chu Yang suddenly had a strange feeling in his heart, as if someone was secretly spying on him. He couldn't help but look up. This little girl's spirit is so sensitive. Ning Tianya was shocked. With a flash, he disappeared without a trace. Chu Yang only had time to see what seemed to be a faint shadow flashing and disappearing in the void. Then the sky became clear. He almost suspected that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He wondered, who was that just now? Is it Yu Lingxue who's secretly spying on me? The big ship sailed smoothly and finally reached the other side. The moment he got off the ship, he saw a person rushing towards him affectionately. Boss, oh boss. I missed you so much. Ha ha ha. Huang Xiaoyou Huang Gong wore his hat askew and opened his lapel, revealing 2 rows of ribs. He opened his mouth and laughed as he welcomed Chu Yang. He opened his arms exaggeratedly and was about to jump. Stop. Chu Yang was speechless. What are you doing? Huang Xiaoyou hurriedly stopped. Boss. I have great news to tell you. Stand. Chu Yang said. Just say it there. Huang Xiaoyou could only stand there and smile weirdly. Finally he was overjoyed. Boss. I'm pregnant. I'm finally pregnant. You're pregnant? Chu Yang was as if struck by lightning. Who got it? This sentence was so powerful that even Wei Wuyan, Wan Renjie and the other 3 were so scared that they took a step back. Their hair stood on end. Ugh! Huang Xiaoyou only realized that he had said something wrong. He hugged Chu Yang's shoulder, and his eyebrows jumped happily. Then, he whispered mysteriously in Chu Yang's ear. I'm pregnant, Chu Yang said admiringly. You're really fast. Really brave. Huang Xiaoyou smiled and was overjoyed. He whispered again. And I have 2 wives now. Chu Yang was dumbfounded. So powerful? It's all because of boss's miraculous hands. Huang Xiaoyou laughed and winked. I'm really very fierce now. Chu Yang suddenly thought of something. Don't just focus on being fierce. Since your wife is pregnant, you should stop for a while and consolidate your strength. I'm warning you, if you do it too frequently, you won't be able to do it again in a few years. Huang Xiaoyou was horrified. Okay. I'll remember. I'll definitely remember. He wiped his sweat. My father still wants to take in concubines for me during this period. It seems that it's not the right time yet. Chu Yang shook his head and was speechless. A group of people crowded around and entered the Huang clan castle. On a mountain far away, Lu Qing was frowning helplessly. He was holding his temples with his hands. He was speechless and at a loss. He was sighing again and again. In front of him, A little lowly in red was making threatening gestures. I want to see my brother Chu Yang. I want to see him. I haven't seen my brother Chu Yang for a long time. Boo-hoo. Teacher, if you don't let me go, I won't practice martial arts anymore. Chapter 887. I'm not going to practice anymore. This sentence was extremely powerful. Luqing hurriedly opened his eyes, looking troubled. Little Wu, be good and go practice. Your big brother Chu Yang is in the third heavens. Because of the Tribulation Sword Master, the passageway to the third heavens is completely closed. We can't go down at all. We have to go down even if we can't. Mo Qinggu said with tears in her eyes. We have to go down even if we can't. Luqing rubbed his temples. How can we go down if we can't go down? Mo Qinggu pouted. Master, didn't you always say that we don't have the conditions to solve this problem for now? But we have to create conditions to solve it, even if we don't have the conditions. She then turned around. That's exactly the case now. It doesn't matter if we can't go down. We have to create conditions to go down even if we have to. Luqing was tongue-tied and his eyes were dull. Creating conditions to solve the problem, and creating conditions to pass through the heavens. How could they be confused? That was the seal of the heavenly Tao. How could they go down? Master, you're lying. You said that you'd let me go down to see big brother Chu Yang when I reached the emperor level. Mo Qinggu angrily accused. She felt that she had been deceived. I'm already in 8th grade emperor level now. Luqing did make such a promise, and he definitely didn't intend to go back on it. But at that time, Supreme Martial Artist Bu didn't expect that the passageway to the heavens would suddenly be closed. He remembered that when he made the promise, Mo Qinggu practiced almost day and night. Her diligence and rapid progress made Ning Tianya and himself so happy that they couldn't close their mouths. But when Mo Qinggu reached the emperor level, the heavens were closed. Who could be blamed for this? Both of us? Little Wu, don't worry, Luqing said with difficulty. You should practice well first. Maybe the passageway to the heavens will open again. Then you can see your big brother Chu Yang. Mo Qinggu swung her ponytail and turned around angrily. In one of her pockets, a small white head cautiously peeked out. 2 pitch-black eyes rolled around. It was the wind fox. Luqing was helpless. Suddenly, Mo Qinggu turned around again. She grabbed his arm with her small hands and swung it back and forth. Her voice was sweet and soft as she said, Sure, father. Liuqing's bones instantly felt lighter. Following the rise and fall of Mo Qinggu's voice, he slowly shook his head and said, I knew that you would definitely have a way. Mo Qinggu continued to shake her head. There must be a way. Luqing narrowed his eyes, being swung back and forth. Then let me go down. Mo Qinggu said in a fawning manner. Go down. Let's go down then. Luqing suddenly woke up from his disciple's bewitching words. Where are we going? Go for 3 days, master. Mo Qinggu continued to shake her head. I really can't go down. Lu was about to cry. Mo Qinggu instantly flung Liuqing's arm to one side. She used so much force that it almost dislocated Supreme Martial Artist Bu's arm. Master, you're not a good person. The little lowly flipped out. With tears in his eyes, he looked at old Butcher angrily. I'm going down anyway. Luqing opened his mouth and rubbed his temples. He was screaming wildly in his heart. Old Ning, Ning Tianya, come back quickly. I'm about to break down. As long as you come back quickly. I admit that you are number 1 under the heavens. I will immediately announce this to the heavens. Anyway, I'm going down. 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 The little lowly stomped her feet and shouted. Luqing had a splitting headache. He said patiently, Little Wu, you see, this is the will of the heavens. The heavens passage is sealed. It's not up to anyone to decide. Other than waiting, there's really nothing else we can do. Mo Qinggu looked at him with distrust. Teacher, didn't you say that you were going to be my disciple? Are the 2 of you the most powerful people in the entire heavenly layer? Of course. Luqing was naturally unwilling to pass on this responsibility. But you guys can't even open a single passage. The little lowly rolled her eyes. He said with disdain, meaning, you can't even open this small passage. How can you be considered the #1 expert? Wuxia was stunned. He stomped his feet and said, but we don't have the final say in this passage. I suddenly feel that there's no future in learning from you guys. You can't even open a passage. Mo Qingwu put her head on her knees and said sadly, you guys are leading me astray. Wuxia almost vomited blood. He said with grief and indignation, little miss, you can't say this casually. Do you know how many people in this heavenly layer are envious of you? Mo Qingwu didn't speak. She just sat there pitifully. Little Wu, be good. Go and practice. Wuxia said. Master, I have a stomachache. I must have gone mad. The little lowly blinked her eyes and said bitterly, I didn't see Brother Chu Yang, and I went mad. Wuxia's eyes widened. He only felt that a mouthful of blood was going to come out of his throat. Was he possessed by the devil? With your aptitude of opening all 100 meridians, it would be strange if you went mad. What's more, chi deviation. Was there really such a painful chi deviation? It wasn't just Wuxia. Even the wind fox in Mo Qingwu's pocket started to laugh. It seemed that it couldn't help but laugh. During this period of time, the wind fox had been basking in Mo Qingwu's limelight. Now it was slowly growing a new tail. If it grew another tail, it would become a 10th grade spirit beast. At this moment, Wuxia's savior finally arrived. A loud shout came from the foot of the mountain. It was full of energy. Wuxia's eyes were filled with tears. Old Ning, my dear father, you're back. A figure appeared in front of him. It was Ning Tianya. When he saw the current situation, he was startled. Wuxia, what kind of master are you? Your disciple isn't practicing, so you accompany her in a daze? Wuxia felt as if he had been pardoned. He didn't want to argue with him. He stood up and said quickly, oh, I have a stomachache. I'll go to the toilet first. Before he could finish his words, he was already gone. His speed was fast and his movements were awkward. It was as if he had already pooped in his pants. Ning Tianya cursed at once. Stomachache. A supreme-level expert has a stomachache. Wuxia, you fucking find such a lousy excuse. You might as well get pregnant. At this moment, Mo Qingwu turned her head sadly. She sniffled and said in a nasal voice, Master. Ning Tianya's heart trembled. He put on a smiling face. Little Wu, I haven't been home. How's your progress? I went mad. Mo Qingwu stroked her belly. She made a painful expression. Chi deviation. Ning Tianya was startled. He almost jumped up. What's going on? Master Bu didn't let me look for Brother Chu Yang. Mo Qingwu was extremely sad. I'm very upset. Oh, Ning Tianya was stunned. Then he rolled his eyes and laughed. Little Wu, look, what did I bring back for you? I don't want anything. Mo Qingwu was about to cry, Master. Can't we go down to the upper 3 heavens? Mo Qingwu felt a little different about her 2 masters. Both masters were equally loving and equally strict. Comparatively speaking, the 2 masters were equally strict. In comparison, Wuxia had a straight face every day, as if he didn't want anyone to get close to him. Ning Tianya, on the other hand, was happy every day. But for some reason, Mo Qingwu would throw a tantrum in front of the obviously fierce Wuxia. But she was in awe of Ning Tianya, who was easy to get along with. In fact, looking at his cold face suddenly becoming helpless and helpless, Mo Qingwu felt a sense of accomplishment in her heart. Mo Qingwu thought. Ning Tianya rolled his eyes. Yes, the heaven passage is closed. We can't go down indeed. Mo Qingwu's face fell. Poor Brother Chu Yang. Ning Tianya rolled his eyes again and said, but your Brother Chu Yang is already in the upper 3 heavens now. Mo Qingwu shouted emotionally. She grabbed Ning Tianya's beard. Her petite body suddenly left the ground and swung up. She kicked her legs. Master, where is Brother Chu Yang? I want to go find him. Ning Tianya shouted. Caught off guard, his snot and tears almost gushed out together. His beard, which had been carefully trimmed for thousands of years, almost ran away from home at this moment. Great aunt, let go of me first. Mo Qingwu hurriedly let go. The wind fox poked its head out of the pocket and looked at Ning Tianya's beard. It looked like it also wanted to go up and grab it. I went down the mountain to get the boneless blood fish this time, and met your brother Chu Yang. Ning Tianya stroked his beard and said, the two of us also had a deep discussion. It was very friendly. Chu Yang asked about your progress in cultivation. What did you say, master? Mo Qingwu blinked her big eyes and clasped her hands nervously in front of her chest. What else can I say? Of course I told him the truth, Ning Tianya said, stroking his beard. Then what did brother Chu Yang say? Mo Qingwu asked persistently. Zai, your brother Chu Yang is very disappointed. Ning Tianya sighed. This makes me feel very ashamed. Very, very disappointed? Mo Qingwu was a little uneasy and her eyelashes drooped down. Why is brother Chu Yang disappointed? Ning Tianya sighed. Your brother Chu Yang asked me. What level is Xiaowu at now? Have you reached the saint level? Just a single sentence, and you've already stunned me. Mo Qingwu was also stunned. She stuttered, Saint level? Yes. Ning Tianya sighed and said, I really can't help it. Xiaowu, your brother Chu Yang is really insensible. Ordinary people need to painstakingly cultivate for hundreds of years, or even thousands of years, to reach the saint level. Xiaowu has only been at the saint level for a year now, and he actually asked if she had reached the saint level. Mo Qingwu frowned, and didn't care about Ning Tianya's words of sowing discord. She said worriedly, did brother Chu Yang encounter some trouble? Do you need help? Ning Tianya's thoughts changed 180 degrees and he said, yes. At that time, I felt that something was wrong, so I also asked him, what trouble do you have? Do you need help? The little loli was anxious and she said, yes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.